you know, you know. So my family and my reader friends all know that I love The Hunger Games. It is my most reread series, and I love all the books, including The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I also love Susan Collins' middle grade series, The Underland Chronicles, which I actually read before The Hunger Games. I spent $30 to get this book day of. I was on a family vacation, and I was like, I can't wait. I borrowed my parents' car, drove to Barnes & Noble just for this book because I was so excited to read this. And I was disappointed. The reason I gave this backstory is because I want you to know that I thought I would love this book and that I am a big fan of The Hunger Games. So I am someone who you would think would like this. And if you had asked me before I read this book, I would have said Susan Collins is one of my favorite authors. And I guess 9 out of 10 books is still pretty good. But right now, I'm having a bit of a moment. Not feeling it right now. But, you know, it's fine. I'm just in my feelings right now. So first, I will do a short non-spoilery section, but eventually I will go completely in depth, breaking down the entire novel and what worked and didn't work for me. It's mostly didn't work though. I am not gonna sugarcoat my thoughts and feelings. So if you can't handle criticism of a book you like, then this is your warning. However, if you like this book and you would like to discuss it in the comments, I would love to discuss it with you. I am all for different opinions, but I'm just letting you know, I'm gonna be harsh. Also, I may be very dramatic in my language for comedic effect. However, I am gonna start with non-spoilers, and just so you know, I have a very long, over 40-page document that I wrote for my review, and I do not have it memorized, so I will be looking at my computer for a lot of this. I apologize. I tried to look at the camera for the introduction, but be warned, I'm going to be looking away a lot, so this is a good video to just listen to. So first, I want to start with the blurb of the book so we're all on the same page. When you've been set up to lose everything you love, what is there left to fight for? As the day dawns on the 50th annual Hunger Games, fear grips the districts of Pan Am. This year, in honor of the Quarter Quell, twice as many tributes will be taken from their homes. Back in District 12, HaYmItCh AbErNaThY is trying not to think too hard about his chances. All he cares about is making it through the day and being with the girl he loves. When HaYmItCh's name is called, he can feel all his dreams break. He's torn from his family and his love, shuttled to the capital with the 3 other District 12 tributes, a young friend who's nearly a sister to him, a compulsive odds maker, and the most stuck-up girl in town. As the games begin, HaYmItCh understands he's been set up to fail, but there's something in him that wants to fight, and have that fight reverberate far beyond the deadly arena. So if I had picked this book up outside of the series, I would have DNF'd it and said it wasn't for me. Or if I did force myself to finish, which I did have to force myself to finish this, I might have been more lenient than I am now. I still would not have liked this book. It's too juvenile for me, but I feel that the Hunger Games series has set a standard, and not only is this book of lesser quality, I think it's actively bad. And I don't think it's wrong to hold this book to that standard. I paid $30. I would not have paid for any other book. A standard's been set, and I think it's fair to hold it to that. To me, it feels like Collins chose to write about HaYmItCh's Hunger Games because he was, at least from my observations, the most requested character to get his own novel about his games, and part of me feels that after Ballad, focusing on a villain which resulted in some people not even picking up the book, HaYmItCh was the safest option. However, in the second book in the original trilogy, Catching Fire, we get HaYmItCh's games entirely described to us, so I do think it's probably the least exciting choice she could have made. However, I do think there's a relatively good explanation for why she does make some changes to the games, but there are also some questions this book brings up, which is not ideal. But also, the Hunger Games series is about a televised tournament where children are forced to fight to the death, so it has a lot of opportunity to feel gratuitous. Even though it's critiquing the thing, that doesn't mean it isn't exploiting said thing. And I think this is a risk that this series takes, if it does start just telling us every single beloved character's games, at one point is the series not just succumbing to the idea that it's entertaining to watch death matches between kids. But people kept requesting prequels for every single favorite character because it's fun to watch kids forced to fight to the death. And obviously these are fake kids. I'm not accusing the readers who request this of actually wanting this in real life. I mean, some of them might, but probably not most of them. I don't know them all personally. That's just my assumption. But people kept requesting the games of their favorite characters because it is fun to watch characters in a tournament, especially one with such high stakes. But my point is that this request is kind of at odds with the message of this series, in that the series is condemning these games, but then the books are entertaining due to these games. And I feel that this series, while I think the original trilogy and the other prequel elevate it and do not feel exploitative or gratuitous. And I think this is something the series has struggled with, in that Mockingjay, the last book in the original trilogy, did not feature a Hunger Games, and it was the worst received of the trilogy. And also the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes kind of goes out of its way to deconstruct the games and portray them as less exciting, to demonstrate how the Capitol has to force it to be exciting, because actually making kids fight to the death isn't that entertaining. It's kind of just depressing. And so while I enjoyed both of these books, I do think that in some ways they were less popular because they didn't actually feature a super exciting death match between kids. Like, this one does have a death match, but like, the movie's very inaccurate on this one. A lot of the games is just the kids underground and no one can actually see them and what they're doing. Also, Mockingjay is my personal favorite. And while I do think Collins understands her point, this book does feel unnecessary and like an indulgent of fandom request at the expense of the point. It isn't a necessary story. It is just another book where kids are forced to fight to the death. Also, the original trilogy was tight, with metaphors that called back to each other, and it felt that there was just enough details to allow the world and characters to feel real, and no more, as to keep the story focused. This isn't an adventure series where there's always a possibility for one more book. This is a dystopia, which is a genre that requires the book to have a message. So the first prequel was already risky, but in my opinion, it fit beautifully with the original trilogy, while also telling its own complete story that could stand on its own as a dystopian novel. Whereas I feel Sunrise on the Reaping feels like an incomplete story on its own, and then is made worse in the context of the series being an unnecessary growth that only takes away from the beauty as a whole. My main issues with this book in no particular order are: 1, it feels more juvenile than the original trilogy and doesn't respect the reader's intelligence. 2, HaYmItCh is a bland protagonist who doesn't feel anything like how he's depicted in the original trilogy, which I understand this is before all his trauma, but in this book he talks more like Lucy Gray from the other prequel than any of the characters in the original trilogy that he is actually alive for. I also felt an emotional distance from him and found many of his actions to be dumb. He also felt like he had plot armor. I get that he has to live and it does end tragically for him, but some things were too convenient. Number 3, all the characters act reckless and speak so openly that it feels like they forgot that they're in a dystopia where there's cameras everywhere. Number 4, the cameos from the other books are so excessive that they feel illogical and like fan service. And on top of that, no one acts in character. This is also at the expense of developing new characters, with the cast becoming so bloated to fit everyone in. Number 5, throughout the book, the Capitol keeps doing horrible things to characters, but the characters almost all feel flat, so I don't care. And it feels like a cheap way to try to force the readers to get emotional. You know how sad you were when Rue died? Imagine how sad you'll be when 5 of her die. Number 6, the rebel plot is idiotic. Not only are they so open about it and immediately asking people to join while in peacekeeper-filled rooms that it's actually shocking to me that they have not been caught, the plan itself also feels pointless. Number 7, the Capitol is dumb and feels less threatening than it does in the other books. The Capitol is also incompetent. They target certain tributes, but despite HaYmItCh clearly being a problem, they never target him, which is why he feels like he has plot armor, and they also needlessly endanger their own people. Number 8, the ending feels rushed and it lacks emotional depth due to the characters lacking depth. So those are my quick bullet points, and now I'm going to go through this entire book in depth in chronological order. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I am spoiling everything now. I believe The Hunger Games is a better and more mature series than a lot of adult books I've read. And I personally think being YA doesn't mean a book can't be amazing and thought-provoking. And when I did a reading wrap-up last year, I said I thought Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was an example of what YA could be. And I feel it was aged up a bit from the original trilogy while still being age appropriate for YA. Ballad respects the reader's intelligence and asks us to think. I'll link my reading wrap-up below for the trilogy and Ballad, and it was just my unscripted thoughts on the book, but I stand by them. In contrast, I found Sunrise to feel more juvenile than the rest of the series, and honestly, I felt as if it were insulting my intelligence with how directly it stated its themes. And what I mean by juvenile is that while yes, this book does include violent deaths of children, they aren't graphic, so I don't think they're too explicit for YA, but they are more than what you would expect in a middle grade novel. However, the way this book is written, it feels as if it expects less of the readers. It plainly states every theme, there is almost no subtext, and every character just blatantly says what's on their mind as if to prevent the reader from interpreting anything for themselves. I think if this book had been as mature or more mature than the original series, that would be fine. Keeping it at the same level would be consistent, and making it more mature would reflect the growth of the original readership. However, it feeling less mature is not just unenjoyable. It honestly read like middle grade to me at times, which is not a criticism of middle grade, but if I come into a book that is established to be in a YA series and it feels middle grade, that is an issue. So Collins has stated previously that she doesn't write a book unless she has something to say, and so I went into the book expecting that, and I am holding her to that. This book, like Ballad, starts with 4 epigraphs about the themes that Susan Collins wishes to explore in her book, which with Ballad, I had originally liked this, but now I wonder if it's because she doesn't think her readership is smart enough to understand the themes without being told beforehand. The first 2 epigraphs in Sunrise are, all propaganda is lies, even when one is telling the truth. I don't think it matters so long as one knows what one is doing and why. George Orwell. A truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. William Blake. These are clearly about propaganda, a topic which is clearly explored in the original trilogy. Mockingjay especially directly follows Katniss as she films war propaganda advertisements. It is obvious, but in a way that flows organically in the story. And personally, I think this theme is better explored in the original trilogy, and I also think Ballad has more interesting things to say about propaganda from the perspective of someone who both believes it and creates it. So yeah, I feel the themes of propaganda were done better in the original trilogy and Ballad, and also what she's trying to do was better done in the book by George Orwell, 1984, which it feels like she's trying to mirror by having posters throughout Pan Am that says things such as, no peace, no bread, no peace, no security, no peacekeepers, no peace, no capital, no peace. This is obviously propaganda to both the reader and HaYmItCh, which if Collins' goal was to warn the readers about propaganda, I don't think it's that effective. It's easy to point to something obvious, but if the book had actually followed a character who believed the propaganda and had to unlearn it, or if the propaganda had been less obvious and there was actual meaningful conversations about it between characters who actually made intelligent points from both sides that had to be refuted, then this book might have actually made readers think about these topics instead of giving them the impression, oh yeah, propaganda is obvious and I'm too smart to ever fall for it. Don't get me wrong, it's not just that I don't think a book should be written if the theme has been done before or better. It's just that when Collins says she doesn't write a book unless she has something to say, and then starts the book with epigraphs from an author who wrote a book with that same theme, and then writes a dystopian book which is inherently supposed to say something, I expect her to say something at least new for her, or at least her series, which I feel like this book didn't do pertaining to the propaganda theme. The next 2 epigraphs are, nothing appears more surprising to those those who consider human affairs with a philosophical eye, than the easiness with which many are governed by the few, an implicit submission with which men resign their own sentiments and passions to those of their rulers. When we inquire by what means this wonder is effective, we shall find that as force is always on the side of the government, the governors have nothing to support them but opinion. It is therefore on opinion only that government is founding, and this maxim extends to the most despotic and most military governments, as well as the most free and most popular. David Hume. That the sun will not rise tomorrow is no less intelligible a proposition and implies no more contradiction than the affirmation that it will rise. Also David Hume. The first one specifically is focused on implicit submission, which I think is very clearly defined within the quote as the fact that the reason the government has power over people is because the people give it power. So how is this new theme covered? Poorly. The book demonstrated this theme by having HaYmItCh rebel or not rebel in several different scenarios, and then blatantly rubbing the theme in your face without any meaningful discussion of it that felt organic to the story. It just felt like Collins wanted to pause to tell you the theme. So for comparison, I want to show you how Collins explores her themes in her other books in the series. Catching Fire features a meaningful disagreement between Katniss and Gale about whether starting a rebellion is justified. So it starts with Katniss. Oh, also pretend they all have Southern accents, just so you know. Well, with an uprising in District 8, I doubt he's spending much time choosing my wedding cake, I shout. The instant the words come out of my mouth, I want to reclaim them. Their effect on Gale is immediate. The flush of his cheeks, the brightness of his gray eyes. There's an uprising in 8, he says in a hushed voice. I try to backpedal, to diffuse him. As I tried to diffuse the districts, I don't know if it's really an uprising. There's unrest. People in the streets, I say. Gale grabs my shoulders. What did you see? Nothing in person. I just heard something. As usual, it's too little, too late. I give up and tell him. I saw something on the mayor's television. I wasn't supposed to. There was a crowd and fires, and the peacekeepers were gunning people down, but they were fighting back. I bite my lip and struggle to continue describing the scene. Instead, I say out loud the words that have been eating me up inside. And it's my fault, Gale, because of what I did in the arena. If I had just killed myself with those berries, none of this would have happened. Peeta could have come home and lived. Everyone else would have been safe too. Safe to do what? He says in a gentler tone. Starve, work like slaves, send their kids to the reaping. You haven't hurt people. You've given them an opportunity. They just have to be brave enough to take it. There's already been talks in the mines. People who want to fight. Don't you see? It's happening. It's finally happening. If there's an uprising in District 8, why not here? Why not everywhere? This could be it. The thing we've been... Stop it! You don't know what you're saying. The peacekeepers outside of 12, they're not like Darius or even Cray. The lives of District people, they mean less than nothing to them, I say. That's why we have to join the fight, he answers harshly. No, we have to leave here before they kill us and a lot of other people too. I'm yelling again, but I can't understand why he's doing this. Why doesn't he see what's so undeniable? Gale pushes me roughly away from him. You leave then. I'll never go in a million years. Ta-da! So I know everyone hates Gale, but to be honest, I think a lot of what he's saying reflects what a protagonist would normally say. Panem is a horrifying dystopia that needs to change, and Gale is the one saying he's willing to risk his own life to save people. Katniss is the one who just wants to escape and save herself and her family. This is not only an organic exploration of this theme, but also Collins respects her readers enough to let the situation be complicated. Yes, we love Katniss and want her to survive, but we also want the evil dictatorship to be overthrown, and Gale has a point. We don't want innocent people to die, but they already are. And then in Mockingjay, there is a scene where the characters are debating blowing up a military base in District 2 that is underneath a mountain, and they've called the base the Nut because it's a tough nut to crack. It starts with Gale. Is it really so necessary that we take the nut, or would it be enough to disable it? That would be a step in the right direction, says Beatty. What do you have in mind? Think of it as a wild dog den, Gale continues. You're not going to fight your way in, so you have two choices, trap the dogs inside or flush them out. We've tried bombing the entrances, says Lime. They're set too far inside the stone for any real damage to be done. I wasn't thinking of that, says Gale. I was thinking of using the mountain. Beatty rises and joins Gale at the window, peering through his ill-fitting glasses. See, running down the sides? Avalanche paths, says Beatty under his breath. It'd be tricky. We'd have to design the detonation sequence with great care, and once it's in motion, we couldn't hope to control it. We don't need to control it if we give up the idea that we have to possess the nut, says Gale. Only shut it down. So you're suggesting we start avalanches and block the entrances, says Lime? That's it, says Gale. Trap the enemy inside, cut off from supplies. Make it impossible for them to send out their hovercraft. While everyone considers the plan, Boggs flips through the stack of blueprints of the nut and frowns. You risk killing everyone inside. Look at the ventilation system. It's rudimentary at best. Nothing like what we have in 13. It depends entirely on pumping in air from the mountainsides. Block those vents and you'll suffocate whoever is trapped. They could still escape through the train tunnel to the square, says Beatty. Not if we blow it up, says Gale brusquely. His intent, his full intent, becomes clear. Gale has no interest in preserving the lives of those in the nut, no interest in caging the prey for later use. This is one of his death traps. The implication of what Gale is suggesting settled quietly around the room. You can see the reaction play on people's faces. The expressions range from pleasure to distress, from sorrow to satisfaction. The majority of the workers are citizens from 2, says Beatty neutrally. So what, says Gale. We'll never be able to trust them again. They should at least have a chance to surrender, says Lime. Well, that's a luxury we weren't given when they firebombed 12, but you're all so much cozier with the capital here, says Gale. By the look on Lime's face, I think she might shoot him, or at least take a swing. She'd probably have the upper hand too, with all her training, but her anger only seems to infuriate him, and he yells, We watched children burn to death, and there was nothing we could do. I have to close my eyes a minute as the image rips through me. It has the desired effect. I want everyone in that mountain dead. I'm about to say so, but then I'm also a girl from District 12, not President Snow. I can't help it. I can't condemn someone to the death he's suggesting. Gale, I say, taking his arm and trying to speak in a reasonable tone. The nut's an old mine. It'd be like causing a massive coal mining accident. Surely the words are enough to make anyone from 12 think twice about the plan, but not so quick as the one that killed our fathers. He retorts. Is that everyone's problem? That our enemies might have a few hours to reflect on the fact that they're dying instead of just being blown to bits? Back in the old days, when we were nothing more than a couple of kids hunting outside of 12, Gale said things like this and worse. But then they were just words. Here, put into practice, they become deeds that can never be reversed. You don't know how those District 2 people ended up in the nut, I say. They may have been coerced. They may be held against their wills. Some are our own spies. Will you kill them too? I would sacrifice a few, yes, to take out the rest of them, he replies. And if I were a spy in there, I'd say, bring on the avalanches. I know he's telling the truth, that Gale would sacrifice his life in this way for the cause. No one doubts it. Perhaps we'd all do the same if we were the spies given the choice. I guess I would, but it's a cold-hearted decision to make for the other people and those who... But it's a cold-hearted decision to make for other people and those who love them. So Constance stated previously she wanted to explore just the war theory in her original trilogy. And this example is really good because it's not a theoretical discussion of the concept, but an actual debate between the characters of a specific action that they could actually take in the war and the different perspectives of how far they're willing to go. And this is effective because while it does make the readers consider what is justified in war, it doesn't feel like a lecture. It directly correlates to the plot and the actions the characters are about to take. And the stances the characters have feel organic and personal. Gale justifies his response by bringing up the horrors he and his people of District 12 experienced at the hands of the Capitol, while Katniss correlates the acts Gale is suggesting they commit to the tragedy that befell her father and traumatized her, so she cannot help but oppose him. Or if we look at The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, that book is about human nature and does often have the characters discuss their worldviews in a more direct way. However, this works because it often is done in a more academic setting, where the villain is asking Coriolanus Snow a question because she seeks to politically groom him to carry on her ideology, specifically the Hunger Games. "Did you think about the Hunger Games?" she asked. "The day we met, Casca asked you what their purpose was, and you gave the stock answer, to punish the districts. Would you change that now?" Coriolanus remembered the conversation he'd had with Sejanus as they unpacked his duffel. "I'd elaborate on it. They're not just to punish the districts. They're part of the eternal war. Each one is its own battle. One we can hold in the palm of our hand instead of waging a real war that could get out of our control." She swung a mouse away from a gaping mouth. "You there, don't be greedy. And they're a reminder of what we did to each other, what we have the potential to do again because of who we are," he continued. "And who are we, did you determine?" she asked. "Creatures who need the capital to survive." And while this is Snow more directly stating his view on humanity, it is also directly related to the tangible in-universe point of this story, which is Snow's decision to embrace the worst parts of himself and to continue the Hunger Games, and why he chooses to continue them. This works for me because this book to me feels like the Hunger Games meets Dark Academia, and also because it's more of a slower character study of Coriolanus Snow. So I understand that this is a discussion of Sunrise on the Reaping, and I've just quoted 3 other books that are not this book, but I wanted to quote them to show you how previously Collins has skillfully interwoven her themes into her stories. Let's see how it's done in Sunrise. So this scene is in the training center before the games, and the tributes who will be fighting in the games almost had a fight, and it was broken up by the peacekeepers. HaYmItCh and a different character considers attacking the peacekeepers, but decide against it, even though they outnumber the peacekeepers. "We could have at least done some damage," I tell Regina. "At least a little, possibly a considerable amount," someone says behind me. I turn to see Plutarch. He waves his camera crew over to record the knife training, but his attention stays on me. "The question is, why didn't you?" Sore ribs and all, I think about punching the question right off Plutarch's face, because the implication is clear. He isn't just asking why we didn't start a mini rebellion in the gym. He means back in District 12 as well. Why do we let the capital brutes rule us? Because we're cowards? Because we're stupid? "Why do you submit to it all?" he presses. "Because you have the guns," Ringina says flatly. "Is it really about the weapons, though? I grant you, they're an advantage. On the other hand, when you consider the sheer difference in numbers, district to capital," Plutarch muses. "Yes, we far outnumber the peacekeepers in 12. I think about the weapons we could lay our hands on: pickaxes, knives, possibly some explosives. But in the face of automatic rifles, aerial bombings, gases, and the capital's menagerie of mutts, I don't think we submit," I say. "It's implied. You accept the capital's conditions." "Because we don't want to end up dead," I snap. "Do you really not see it?" "No, I do. I see the hangings and the shootings and the starvation and the Hunger Games." "I do," Plutarch says. "And yet, I still don't think the fear they inspire justifies this arrangement we've all entered into. Do you?" We stare at him. He's not taunting or mocking us. He's genuinely asking, "Why do you agree to it? Why do I, for that matter? Why have the people always agreed to it?" When we don't respond, he shrugs. "Well, it's something to think about." So I have multiple issues with this, but first let me conclude my original point. It's literally just a character coming up to the protagonist and stating the theme and being like, "Hey, you should think about this." There's no nuance or subtlety, and on top of that, it takes me out of the moment. This is not an academic setting where the directness would make sense. In fact, his directness seems stupid and unnecessarily dangerous in the dystopia. He's asking them why they submit to the capital and don't rebel. This is something that it seems like he could get in trouble for, and he's asking it out loud in a room full of peacekeepers. It takes me out of the story on top of feeling amateurish in its directness and signals to me, hey, this is the theme. And this happens repeatedly. That time I just read you is the best example. it goes downhill from here. There are multiple times where the theme is directly stated in a way that is not how people talk or think. Another time it's Plutarch where he directly states the theme verbatim. Of course I have. One last thing. From the Capital's perspective, the games are the best propaganda we have. You tributes, you're our stars. You carry it out, but only if we control the narrative. Don't let us. Plutarch grasps my shoulders and gives me a little shake. No more implicit submission for you, HaYmItCh AbErNaThY. Blow that water tank sky high. The entire country needs you to. No more implicit submission for you, HaYmItCh AbErNaThY. Don't worry. Collins was so pleased with this line that she repeats it verbatim. Plutarch's words echo through my head, mocking me. No more implicit submission for you, HaYmItCh AbErNaThY. Blow that water tank sky high. The entire country needs you. I'm so glad that she was so happy with that line that she felt the need to say it again. And then a fourth time, HaYmItCh, a 16-year-old boy, literally thinks in his head in first-person perspective, present tense, and I want to scream out the truth. A boy's head was blown up, people in 12 were shot, my reaping was rigged, but I just sit there mute and radiating implicit submission. Snow has me by the short hairs, and he knows it. Guys, he's radiating implicit submission. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's how people think. Whenever I don't stand up to authority personally, I think about how I'm radiating implicit submission. I have, ever since I was 16 years old, that's just how I think. In fact, I don't know why Katniss and Gale didn't directly discuss just war theory by name. It makes them seem kind of stupid. Like, Katniss would totally say, we have to make sure this is a just war. I mean, she obviously would use that terminology in her everyday thoughts, let alone speech. She was really dumbed down compared to the scholarly HaYmItCh. And it's a constant how directly the characters state and repeat certain themes. A metaphor is brought up at the beginning of how you can paint your own poster, which is a saying established about how you can send your own message against the Capital's propaganda. And it's constantly brought up. The constant reminder of the themes reminds me that this is a novel and keeps me from ever being truly immersed. The point of fiction having themes is not for them to be told to the reader, but to explore them through the characters and the story. And at this point, Sunrise feels more like an essay held together by fan service. So I've been comparing this book to the others a lot, but now let's move on from the epigraphs to the narrative. It starts with HaYmItCh in District 12, and I found this to be the best part. I don't know if it was actually because it was better or if it was because I hadn't lost hope yet. It's revealed that HaYmItCh was born on the reaping day and how he doesn't have a birthday cake or celebrate it normally due to this. That sucks. We follow HaYmItCh through his morning, the day of the reaping, talking to his innocent little brother and hard-working widowed mother, and Hattie, the woman he works for making illegal liquor, and also his girlfriend, Lenordov. It's okay, this does feel like District 12, but a much lighter version. HaYmItCh's father may have died in a mining accident like Katniss's, but his mother did not check out. And like Gale's mother, she started doing laundry for money. And with only 2 kids, it was less mouths to feed than his family. HaYmItCh also was able to get a job making liquor for Hattie, so while his job was illegal, it was more normal. He's not a kid struggling to hunt and scavenge in the forest to feed his family. He has a job with an employer, and while he makes liquor, he doesn't drink it since he doesn't enjoy feeling drunk. This is very ironic since he becomes an alcoholic as an adult, and I'm sure I was supposed to be like, oh my gosh, it's so tragic, but I wasn't yet invested in this version of HaYmItCh, so it didn't do anything for me at that point. I also have an issue with how District 12 feels lighter because the Peacekeepers are supposed to be more domineering than when Katniss grew up. HaYmItCh is living in a District 12 with public lashings and hangings being a commonplace. However, he does not read as someone who has experienced this. In fact, this is only brought up to say how Katniss's mom is actually a good person, unlike how he had assumed, which is not relevant to the story of this book. This should be traumatic for him and paint who he is as a person and how he sees the world, but it doesn't. In fact, none of these characters carry the heaviness or fear their oppressive upbringing should cause. One thing about this reading experience compared to Ballad, which is a prequel about the villain Coriolanus Snow, which is while reading Ballad, I immediately felt like it was Snow at 18 living in Panem. With this book, I didn't have that same immediate click where it felt like the protagonist was the same HaYmItCh. I'm not particularly sure why. However, I do feel like what happens later on in this book justifies my initial lack of immersion. Honestly, HaYmItCh's family gets so little time. They're flat characters. Same with his friends. His little brother is the innocent younger sibling character, but feels less important than Prim. In the original Hunger Games novel, Katniss would remember specific stories of Prim, about how Prim saved Buttercup, and how Katniss got Prim her goat, and how Prim was a natural-born healer. Then throughout the novel, Katniss would remember Prim and compare her to her situation. Katniss was first drawn to Rue because she reminded her of her sister Prim. Katniss noted how Prim would have been better at caring for Peeta when he was injured in the arena due to Prim being a natural healer. Prim always felt like she was important to Katniss and relevant. But unfortunately in Sunrise, there were so many characters to juggle that HaYmItCh's mother and brother faded to the background. The character I feel Collins prioritized, which in turn I feel HaYmItCh really focused on, is his girlfriend Lenore Dove. So first of all, it feels like Collins was so pleased with Lucy Gray from the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes that she wanted HaYmItCh's girlfriend to be similar to Lucy Gray so that President Snow can see parallels between the two characters and point it out in the book. They're both colorful, musical covey girls with L first names based on poems and second names based on the color gray. And they have the last name Bard, because they're related. They're from the same family. I don't think their personalities are the same, but I found Lenore Dove's personality lacking, so having her be a clear parallel to another character for the benefit of the theme only enhances that feeling. I wished instead of prioritizing making her a parallel to another character, instead, she was allowed to be her own person with her own complete identity. In Ballad, Lucy Gray starts off kind of like a manic pixie dream girl in that she's a bright and colorful light in Snow's world, so unlike anyone he's ever known. But then in the third act, we see how she has her own past and history that doesn't fit what Snow wants, which results in his possessive feelings increasing and him eventually realizing she isn't a perfect songbird he can keep in a cage, but a person with her own life, hopes, and dreams, who he sees as a threat and tries to kill her. Her starting as a manic pixie dream girl is purposeful and is a commentary on Snow as a person. Whereas Lenore Dove's main thing is that she devotedly loves HaYmItCh and that she's rebellious, and then she dies for the pathos at the end. We all know that's coming. At the beginning, she talks to HaYmItCh about rebelling, but it's so metaphorical and she feels less like a teen and more like a poem. She's like, why should the sun rise on the reaping? It doesn't have to. Who says it has to? It's like, girl, why? Stop. Like, the quote is nice in the epigraph, but okay, that's how she talks. Okay. And their relationship is so sickly sweet, it felt hard to get attached. Instead of something tangible to grasp onto, we get over-the-top declarations of love. And on top of this, most of HaYmItCh's memories of her later on are focused more on the lyrics of the song she sang as opposed to her personally. Her biggest difference between her and Lucy Gray is how recklessly rebellious Lenore Dove is. And this could have worked if it weren't for every character in the book being so recklessly dumb, including characters from the original series who previously weren't reckless. But also, Lenore Dove's rebelliousness gets less and less important in the book until the focus is just on their undying love. Lenore Dove just feels less tangible than characters I like in the other books. She's a shell, and her purpose in the story is to just be loved by and love HaYmItCh and make him promise to rebel when she tragically dies. Lenore Dove also gives HaYmItCh a necklace she has specifically made by her uncle that also acts as a flint striker as a birthday gift. It is a gold snake and Mockingjay, like the image on the ugly book cover with his cat dog Mockingjay snake thing going on, but I don't think the spikes are on the actual necklace. That's added for the cover. This also reflects how I feel Collins at this point is prioritizing metaphor and callbacks over fleshing out these characters. The reason the pendant is a snake and Mockingjay is because Lenore Dove says they're both survivors. That's it. It doesn't matter that neither animal appears relevant to HaYmItCh or Lenore Dove. You may think a dove for her name or a goose because she raises geese would make more sense, but no, it has to be a mockingjay and a snake because those animals have already been established to have important meaning in this series. She does comment on liking mockingjays, I think once, but never snakes. Lenore Dove is not allowed to have her own identity. The original trilogy was tightly written, and not everything was symbolism, but I feel a lot of things within the series have important symbolism and called back to each other. There wasn't much unnecessary information in the book. We're given just enough detail for this world to feel real and lived in. In my opinion, adding books after the original trilogy is not only unnecessary, but probably more difficult than the typical sprawling fantasy adventure. It's like giving 1984 a sequel or prequel. Possible, but unnecessary and difficult. So in the original trilogy, Katniss was represented by the mockingjay, a bird that is a result of the failed capital-made all-male mutations, the Jabberjay, being left to die in the wild only to thrive and mate with the natural female mockingbirds to create the Mockingjay, something the capital never intended to exist. The result of the Jabberjays living when the capital intended them to die. While President Snow is represented by a snake, which uses venom to kill while he uses poison to kill. Also, there's the stereotype of snakes being conniving evil, so it makes sense. I also think the metaphors carry well into Ballad, with Coriolanus Snow having already been represented by the snake. And while Lucy Gray is a singer like a songbird like the Mockingjay, in some ways she is also like a snake, mysterious and unknown to Snow. And while in the prequel, both Snow and the Capitol used capital-made snakes and Jabberjays as weapons, it's the Mockingjay and natural snakes that Lucy Gray connects with. I could go on much more about this, but that would be a whole nother video. But on top of that, Lucy Gray's not like wearing jewelry with snakes and mockingjays. It's more of a metaphor, and the actual animals are interacted with in the story in a way that feels natural and organic. My point is, I feel that while these connections feel relevant and meaningful in Ballad, it falls flat, at least for me, in Sunrise on the Reaping. And saying they're both survivors feels like a half-assed excuse to shoehorn the metaphor in. Lots of animals are survivors. In fact, every animal that's not extinct you could probably say is a survivor. The Mockingjay may be a standout example in their world of a survivor, but the snake certainly is not. Collins already had a clear way to tie the Mockingjay into this book. In the original trilogy, Katniss's pin is supposed to have belonged to Maysilee Donner in Sunrise on the Reaping. But instead of having Maysilee wear the pin into her games and potentially giving it to HaYmItCh to take home to her family as a symbol of her being a failed Mockingjay and HaYmItCh bringing it back to potentially try again, Maysilee just ends up hating the pin and left it at home. And we have a shoehorned in Mockingjay Flint necklace instead. If she wanted to have the metaphor, do the easy thing, don't overcomplicate it, and then do something stupid. This book makes significant things from the original trilogy less significant, such as that Mockingjay pin, and tries to force significance when it doesn't make sense. Also, in the first trilogy, there are 2 songs written on the page, one in the first book and one in the third book, both of which were memorable and impactful songs both in the books and movies. And it made sense why the character was singing. One of the songs, The Hanging Tree, being iconic within itself. Then in the first 2 parts of the Ballad book, it's about the games. And we get 3 songs by Lucy Gray at important moments for her character where she actually sings the songs in the story. In reality, she's actually singing them. This is also used to contrast the Anthem of Panem that Snow's grandmother loves to sing every morning, and he has to sing multiple times for different events. The 2 different types of music represent their 2 differences. Then in the third act, we get a bunch of her performances at District 12, and she sings a lot. Some are relevant, though. It can be a bit much at times, but overall it fits the story and usually serves a purpose. Though I will say, I don't know if Collins at this point knows that she can just say a character singing without showing us the lyrics, which is weird because at the end of Mockingjay, Katniss, when she's like in isolation, talks about how she just starts singing constantly and we don't get a single one of their lyrics because we didn't need it. But Collins forgot that that's an option. That's okay. Whereas in Sunrise, HaYmItCh is constantly thinking of songs Lenore Dove would sing. It can get tedious to read. I think Collins fell so much in love with the music and the District 12 characters of Ballad that she went hard to make the characters in Sunrise more like the ones in Ballad, even though Sunrise takes place closer to the original trilogy and many of the characters in Sunrise appear in the original trilogy while only 2 appear in Ballad. And one of them is the president, who is not going around singing folksy District 12 songs. This counterfeit HaYmItCh talks more like Lucy Gray's character, which is supposed to take place 40 years before the events of this book, and he's 16 in this book. He talks more like her than he does himself in the original trilogy that takes place 24 years after this book. I did enjoy in Ballad how folksy Lucy Gray was. It worked for her. It doesn't work for HaYmItCh. We already know he's not folksy. You can't gaslight me into thinking HaYmItCh is folksy. Anyway, in District 12, we get introduced to multiple characters from the original series. Katniss's parents, Peeta's father, who all get first names introduced to us. I don't even care enough to say their names. And while it is believable in a small coal mining town, it reflects a larger issue where it seems Collins feels the need to insert every single character who could possibly be alive from the original trilogy in this book, resulting in HaYmItCh moving throughout his day in a way to ensure he sees everyone important instead of allowing the reader to spend time with the characters we should feel most strongly about. In this book, his family and his girlfriend. This is a repeated issue where new characters who should carry more emotional weight in this book have to compete with returning characters who aren't actually that relevant. Anyway, we go through his day name dropping characters. At first, it's exciting, but it's also cheap writing. Being excited because a character you like is referenced doesn't mean the book referencing them is good. It means the previous one is good, and I'm excited for the character I already love to be brought up. In the first few chapters, I would have moments of, hey, it's them. But by the time we got to the capital, I was already over it. Getting excited because a character you're nostalgic for isn't good writing. It's a cheap way to get readers excited. It inflates your view on the book as exciting when if you didn't previously know these characters from a different book, it wouldn't matter. It reminds me of a video I was recommended and watched recently called Apparently No Way Home Gets Worse Every Time You Watch It by Elvis Menezes, which I'll link below because this review is covering a lot and I think he goes over that topic well. I'm not familiar with his other videos. Part of me wonders if Ballad benefited from taking place 64 years before the original trilogy so that most of the characters wouldn't be born yet. So Collins would not be able to overstuff the book with already established characters, even if she wanted to. But then in Sunrise, she was able to do it. So she indulged, and I don't like it. It's too much indulgence. We also learned that Dupe HaYmItCh was friends with Katniss's father, Burdock. And this feels like such a retcon to HaYmItCh and Katniss's relationship. Real HaYmItCh, not Dupe HaYmItCh. In the original trilogy, real HaYmItCh never mentions her dad, and they start off disliking each other. When Katniss starts her game, HaYmItCh is just as checked out as usual, but once Katniss and Peeta force HaYmItCh to pay attention and prove that they have skills to survive, then he is given enough hope that one of them could survive that he tries. Now it comes across that he only tried because he knew Katniss's dad. Also, in Sunrise, it says he noticed her as a child in the Hob, so I don't know why he didn't already know she could hunt and had to be told that she could hunt by Peeta if he noticed her. That seems dumb. He would have seen her bringing in game all the time. This book falls into the trap of trying to connect everything to the point that it makes everything feel contrived and it makes the world feel smaller. It takes what was a personal relationship between Katniss and HaYmItCh from dislike to trust to caring and simplifies it to him just knowing her dad. It's not that Katniss and HaYmItCh are so alike and that he sees promise in her. He doesn't choose her to live over Peeta because she has a better shot. He just liked her dad. And she also reminds him of a different character, which we will get to later because they need double connections, not even just one. Also, this book tells us that being gay is now illegal in Panem, which to me feels like a retcon. In Catching Fire, Katniss says you can marry whoever you want in District 12. In Ballad, Snow knows 2 gay characters and never even comments on the fact, which comes across to me that it's so normal in Panem that it's not even worth commenting about. So why is being gay illegal if the dictator doesn't care? And it didn't seem illegal before when he was young, and it doesn't seem illegal after. So is it just like illegal in the middle somewhere for some reason, even though the person in charge doesn't care? Like, I don't understand. To me, this comes across as the author wanting to include a point that is popular for modern books in order to get some sort of credit or recognition that she's good, even if it doesn't fit the previous lore. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I do recommend the video Writing as a Performance, Rant on Modern Publishing by Library Unbounded. Again, I was recommending her video. I'm not that familiar with her videos, but I thought that one was good. And it immediately made me think of this book. And of course, that doesn't mean that you can't address these topics in other books, but maybe write a series where it would make sense, Collins, instead of writing a shitty book. Anyway, back to Sunrise. The characters gather for the reaping, and the names are drawn for the tributes by a lady named Drusilla Sickle, and she is abhorrent. I immediately hated her and her viciousness towards the people of District 12, which I would say is a good thing about this book, the fact that it made me hate her so easily. All the names are drawn, and the second boy is not HaYmItCh. However, that boy runs and ends up being killed by the peacekeepers as he tries to escape, which Drusilla is all for, except they didn't wait for him to get out of sight of the square, so now there's blood everywhere and it's a mess, and it's not good for the camera. Chaos erupts in the square, and Luella Dove is trying to get the shrieking mother of the murdered boy to calm down, and a peacekeeper is about to hit her when HaYmItCh tackles the guy. This results in Drusilla saying HaYmItCh will be in the games. She reveals that it's a 5-minute delay to the feed, and so they reset it and refilm the boy's name being drawn when she pretends to draw HaYmItCh's name despite never actually drawing him. So this brings up the interesting theme of propaganda and how they can change footage to manipulate, but this also does make you question why they didn't also have a 5-minute delay when they interviewed a tortured PETA in Mockingjay, which resulted in him being able to warn the people of District 13 about a bombing, which actually saved people and made the bombing fail to kill anyone. So, you know, they just got technologically worse. Personally, I think the message of propaganda was so well explored in the original trilogy that any benefit of restating this theme in an unnecessary book is outweighed by the plot hole that this creates. Like, anything interesting in this book is outweighed by the fact that it makes you question the logistics of why that's even the case. But to be fair, despite the plot hole, the sequence is overall good. The twist of how HaYmItCh was unfairly reaped, though it's all unfair really to force children to fight to the death, and how they covered it up was engaging. Then Drusilla says the families will not get to say goodbye due to their behavior, and she takes 2 of the tributes. However, Plutarch is there, and he is the lead director. I guess that's the first shoehorned in cameo because we've never had a lead director for these games before, but now we do. In the original series, the tributes have their escorts and mentors, but in this one, they also have Plutarch acting as a director. In Ballad, Snow acts as a mentor, and all the mentors are students, which is different than the original trilogy, but this works because it's so much earlier in the history of the games, and more importantly, the difference is justified within the book. It is explained. In Sunrise, the use of the cameraman is never acknowledged. It just feels like something Collins chose to do in order to get the character she wanted in the place she wanted. It feels like a choice by an author, not an organic decision by the people of the world. Plutarch's character is the main one to push the themes in the book. He actively manipulates the footage, which reflects the themes of propaganda, and that was a well done example of a theme. But then he also directly talks about implicit submission by name, which is just annoying and poorly done in my opinion. Anyway, Plutarch convinces Drusilla to let 2 tributes stay with him so he can film their families being sad. When he films the first family, he requests that they act upset for the camera, and they refuse. They only react when their daughter is taken away and they think the cameras are off them, but he turns it around and actually films them being upset because he's being a butthole. But then for some reason, when it comes to HaYmItCh's family, he offers HaYmItCh's girlfriend, mother, and brother to say goodbye if they act sad. And I don't know why only his family gets the offer, except for the fact that he is the main character. Lenore Dove refuses to perform and remains straight-faced before leaving, while HaYmItCh's mother and brother do perform for the camera, acting more and more distraught as Plutarch makes them perform again and again. Then they say goodbye, where HaYmItCh's mother tells him not to let the capital capital use his tears, despite failing to prevent them from using her own. This sequence, I would say, is good. And also then she mentions to remember what his father said, and he's like, oh yeah, my father said to paint your own poster, which means to like send your own message. Don't let the capital use you in their propaganda poster. So this feeds into Plutarch's morally gray persona and fits his character from the previous books, which I did like. And I do like the commentary it gives, even though I would argue it is nothing new for the series. It does fit the story, despite the fact that it implies the capital got dumber. Then they ride the train to the capital, where on the train, they do get good and better accommodations than how the tributes were just chained in cattle cars and not fed in Ballad, which takes place 40 years earlier, but it's not as extravagant with endless food and private rooms like the original Hunger Games 24 years later. Throughout the story, they are chained sometimes, which never happened in the original series, but not as often as Ballad, which was just like consistent. I'm overall fine with that, the logistics of the train ride. But I also want to comment, I have seen people say they thought this book was a necessary connection from the prequel to the first book, and I don't necessarily think I needed a connection. I think that we can infer it gradually evolved over time from point A to B without needing a book for each step. It's fine if you enjoy seeing the middle ground, but I don't think it was needed. On the train, we get to know the other District 12 tributes better. Llewellyn McCoy, a 12-year-old who HaYmItCh already knows as his neighbor. She used to have a crush on him when she was younger, and she would go around telling everyone he was her sweetheart. So in turn, HaYmItCh nicknamed her Sweetheart. In the original trilogy, HaYmItCh calls Katniss Sweetheart, which annoys her at first, being said condescendingly, then evolving into a more sincere sentiment. And this reveals that it was not because he's drunk and obnoxious, but because Katniss reminds him of Luella. And this is meant to be a poignant realization for the reader, like when HaYmItCh says he doesn't drink. But for me, it was just fine. I think if he had not also been friends with Katniss's dad, maybe I would have been more excited about it. But I already know they have a previous connection. And again, it takes his relationship with Katniss from being personal to it just being about Katniss reminding him of other people he previously cared about. Not everything needs an explanation. And sometimes he can just call her sweetheart because he's obnoxious and he wanted to call her sweetheart. And on top of that, Luella and Katniss don't seem similar in my opinion. So the connection feels shallow. It's just like they both have the same look of black hair, olive skin, and gray eyes, and they're girls. Besides that, Luella is the basic good innocent kid trope, and she didn't stand out to me. I don't see her as particularly different from HaYmItCh's brother, or any just pure innocent little sad tragic kid. Well, in the first Hunger Games book, we have Rue as the innocent kid who's tragically killed, and it's sad. This book has so many kids dying for the pathos that I just cared less about each individual death as opposed to really caring about one. The other District 12 tributes, I think, are the best characters in the book, but none of them are memorable characters that I will be like, oh my gosh, favorite character. Nah, they're just the best compared to the rest. And they are Maysilee Donner and Wyatt Callow. And Maysilee Donner is the only one of the tributes reaped in this game besides HaYmItCh that is mentioned in the original trilogy when Katniss and Peeta watch HaYmItCh's games in Catching Fire. Every other character is new. What we know from Catching Fire is that she was friends with Katniss's mother and the Mockingjay pin belonged to her. She is the mean, rich, blonde girl in school. Well, rich for District 12. She has a reputation for being snooty and mean, and HaYmItCh personally doesn't like her because when he got Chigger, she started calling him the name Itchy Itchy HaYmItChy. But when she's on the train, her ire is trained on the capital, But when server yells at Luella for hesitating to pick a sandwich, Maysilee turns it on him, criticizing him for not giving them napkins or plates or utensils. She stands up for herself and the other tributes in a way that comes across as looking down on the capital, which is unique for the series. She may have been considered prissy and mean in District 12, but through the games, HaYmItCh learns she has more depth to her. She's also a fashionista who puts the capital citizens in their place for their stupid fashion, which is both funny but also results in super cringy dialogue, such as, I know my grandmother had a jacket like yours, but we wouldn't let her wear it out of the house. She tells a man wearing a suit made of $100 bills, that's sweet. You wore all your friends tonight. And then she told a woman with cat ears, "Is that a purse for your flea powder?" So your mileage may vary with this level of cringe. I do like her. She even slaps Drusilla, which Drusilla deserved. Though I will say I felt a lot of the characters were so readily open about their hatred of the Capitol in this book. Like I said before, speaking out in that way should carry more weight than it does in this book. I understand it takes place earlier than the original trilogy, but based on how the world is, it feels like they should be more hesitant. This isn't different enough for them to be this outspoken. And almost every character in this book is actively trying to rebel. It's like how in the original Hunger Games, Peeta stood out because he was not only focused on his own survival, but also retaining his humanity and not wanting to play the game by the Capitol's rules, to show them that he's more than a pawn. Katniss didn't start off wanting to prove she was more. She was confused by what he meant and just wanted to live. But with almost every good guy character in Sunrise openly criticizing the Capitol and working to rebel, Maysilee starts to feel less special and more generic within the context of her story. I think she should have been the character allowed to remain brash. So I still think Maysilee is a standout with her own quirks. She is the classic blonde mean girl with a heart of gold, but it did kind of work except for the fact that she ended up being overshadowed, and she would have been better in a better book. Because with so many characters, despite some memorable moments, I wasn't able to get truly attached to her. Then Wyatt Callow is the son of a family who runs the betting around the Hunger Games in District 12. He is personally an odds maker, which means he creates the values for the bets, but he doesn't personally participate in the gambling. So he'll be the one who says it's 40-1 odds. Due to this, HaYmItCh views him negatively at first, and over the course of the book, we learn that he's actually a good person who cares a lot about others. And he ends up dying in the initial bloodbath defending the little girl Lulu. I think his knowledge about the tributes and their chances to win and how he makes HaYmItCh realize you can't choose your family and it's unfair to judge Wyatt based on his family makes him interesting. And I like that his character didn't feel over the top rebellious like every other character. Still, due to the overabundance of characters, he does again bleed into the background. And I feel that instead of allowing him to be complex by him defending his family and maybe how that is how they are able to survive, he immediately disowns them, saying, "I don't bet, I just set the odds." This is a larger issue I have with this book where I feel like Collins wants to make sure the good guys are pure good and that we know it. It's more relevant later on, but I'm saying it now. For example, the real HaYmItCh we meet in this book is a drunk who at first drunkenly makes jokes when Katniss and Peeta ask him for help surviving the games. We learn he is like this due to his trauma, but that doesn't make his flaws okay. He's still not helping kids who are going into a life or death situation, but it doesn't make his flaws understandable. And we empathize with his flaws and grow to care about him because he's been going through this year after year, watching kids die, even when he was trying. And then once the games start, Katniss sees Peeta team up with the hated careers, and she watches as he goes back to finish off a girl Cato attacked but failed to kill. Questioning who to trust was so important in this book. Then in Sunrise, it feels like Collins goes out of her way to make sure that each character immediately defines himself as good or bad for HaYmItCh. None of the good guy tributes are anything but pure good and never a threat despite this being a fight to the death. The reader is never allowed to wonder. Back to the plot. Once they're off the train, they get escorted to, I think, an old gym. I know it's not like a fancy designated facility as much as an old building they decided to use for the training center this year. The girls and boys are separated and forced into locker rooms where they're made to strip and shower. In the boys' shower, a District 1 boy, Panache, is walking around pretending to hump people before getting hit by a District 11 boy, and they're about to fight when the bug spray starts spraying and everyone is gagging too much to fight. I didn't like how obnoxiously dumb Panache was written. For a book advertised as about propaganda, writing a well-rounded career tribute who is someone who has been raised to fight in these games and taught that it was an honor since they were born would have been a good opportunity and a good way to explore the themes of propaganda. But no, he's just like a dumb idiot and stupid. And yeah, he sucks. Then the characters get their hair and makeup done, where at least HaYmItCh's team is 2 college students who are doing this for their final project. I guess beautician school. This to me feels like a pretty even middle ground between Ballad, which had like students as mentors, and the Hunger Games, which has professionals for everything that we know of. So the District 12 stylist is late because he's drunk and licking toads. And they almost have to go onto their chariots in paper hospital gowns because they burned all their clothes. But then the stylist comes with the same minor costumes he's brought every year for the past who knows how many games for District 12 costumes. And I like how this book stayed consistent because it was said HaYmItCh wore that crappy minor costume, and he did. Then there is the chariot ride entrance scene. So up until this scene, I had hope. I had dreams. I still had hope that this book could be something great. It wasn't there yet, but it was not a lost cause. This scene ruined all chances of that for me. During the parade, the audience is drunk and unruly, and one of them shoots a firework into the District 12 chariot, resulting in Luella dying in the crash. So then HaYmItCh in his anger grabs her dead body, runs the entire length of the parade route, dodging pursuing peacekeepers through the chaos, and then he gets to the front of the parade, steals the District 1 chariot as the peacekeepers take it from the dumbest tribute panache, and HaYmItCh rides this chariot the rest of the route, stopping in front of the president's mansion where the horses were trained to stop, so it's not like he controlled them, but still. And then he lays her dead body on the ground beneath where President Snow stands, and then claps at him to send the message that the death is on Snow. Then the peacekeepers get HaYmItCh and escort him away while he spits in the face of the Capitol citizens, and they think it's funny that he's spitting on them, and they love him for it. It's so dumb. The idea of HaYmItCh clinging to her on the ground, not wanting them to take her away, could have been emotional. But instead, him outrunning all the peacekeepers and stealing a chariot while carrying the dead body feels ridiculous. Especially since he didn't even have a plan until he was already clapping. It's just all over the top, and it doesn't fit tonally with the rest of the series. What could have been an emotional scene ends up feeling cartoonish. The Hunger Games is a sci-fi dystopia, but the characters feel like real people in their abilities. And while what he did isn't superhuman, it felt very main character to me, that he was able to outrun all of them, what I believe to be a relatively long distance, and then he stole a chariot. I couldn't buy it being the same world as the original series, and also like the imagery is just like ridiculous. It's not moving. It's just like, oh my gosh. It feels like Collins realized the entrance parade leading up to the games have been done in 2 of her books already, so she needed it to be more dramatic this time. Having a boy run away during the reaping and being shot, causing HaYmItCh to be unfairly chosen, feels realistically horrible for Panem and is a new twist within the context of the books. But the twist to the parade just feels out of place and like plot armor for HaYmItCh so he can stand up to the man. And that leads into my other issue with this scene. HaYmItCh's motivation makes no sense in this entire book. In the original trilogy and Ballad, there's a very strong sense that the protagonist and all the characters want to live. Some might not believe they can, but they all want to. And they are scared to die. Peeta wanting Katniss to live, as opposed to him, is the exception. And in Catching Fire, when all the other characters are risking their lives for Katniss, it's because there are adults with a plan who are willing to die to take down the Capitol. And while Katniss isn't part of the plan, she wants Peeta to live because she knows Snow will not let her live, and she loves Peeta. None of these characters' sacrifices or willingness to do so is taken lightly. Then in Sunrise, it feels like no one is properly scared to die or even that motivated to live. They do not feel like children being faced with death. They feel like pawns used by an author in a book. From the moment HaYmItCh was reaped, it feels like he assumed he was dead, so much so that he wasn't even motivated to try to live. And yes, we know he lives, but I still want to feel like he cares if he does. And honestly, he doesn't seem that beat up about it. For me, it's not a poignant emotional realization of his own mortality, but a foregone conclusion that makes him feel more like a character and less like a human. As far as I know, HaYmItCh doesn't have a death wish, or shouldn't, and up until that act, he had done nothing to warrant his targeted death. It's not meaningful that he doesn't care about his life, it's meaningless. In The Hunger Games Book 1, when Katniss is doing her private session with the Gamemakers to demonstrate a skill she has, she gets mad at them for ignoring her in favor of their drunken feast, and she shoots an arrow into the apple of the roast pig they're eating. This isn't an intended act of rebellion, but a rash decision out of anger that they're ignoring her when her life is on the line, and the score they give her will affect her ability to get sponsors, which can be the difference between life or death in the arena. When she leaves, she realizes what a mistake this was, and once on the floor of District 12, she runs to her room sobbing and locks the door, crying for hours, afraid they'll punish her or her family for her actions. She is scared and knows what danger she is in. This vulnerability reminds you that she is a kid, and this is tragic. Then in Sunrise, HaYmItCh just rebels way more directly, and he doesn't worry about the consequences. And the other kids just cheer him on. This book feels like it takes every chance to stick it to the man it can, which in turn cheapens each instance as commonplace. Then when HaYmItCh is escorted away, the people of the Capitol cheer him on because they're idiots. It makes him feel like the most main character to ever main character. Of course, the people of the Capitol think it's funny he disrespected their president. Of course they want to sponsor him for it. Of course, when they ask him his name and he spits in their face, they think it's funny. Of course, because he's the main character and he needs sponsors. Honestly, we know from the original trilogy that this overall book will end badly for HaYmItCh, but he literally spits in the face of Capitol citizens and they love him for it. I might even call him a Gary Stu for that. And part of me wonders if this was a new book with an original protagonist and not an already beloved protagonist who was well written in previous books. I don't know about this guy, but the real HaYmItCh is pretty well done. Part of me believes if this wasn't supposedly HaYmItCh, if people would consider calling him a Gary Stu. And I also wonder if he was female, if people would call him a Mary Sue. I understand that this book ends tragically for him, but that doesn't mean making everything come unrealistically easy for him leading up to that is good writing. Making a tragic ending doesn't excuse the rest of the story being dumb. And then when he's being dragged away, Maysilee Donner is like, you made them own that. And HaYmItCh is like, I guess I did, which... Why would you do that if you didn't think that's what you were doing? Why did HaYmItCh act like he didn't realize that's what he did? Is he dumb? In the original trilogy, he's supposed to be clever. He's smart. He's the first one to figure out Peeta's warning about the bombing in Mockingjay. What? Why is he like this? He's not clever in this book. It's like when someone tells you their character's charismatic, or in this case, they tell you their character's clever, but they're clearly not. And you're just reading this book with this dissonance where all these characters are acting like something is true, and then you're reading the actual words and the actual dialogue and you're like, no, it's not. Just because you tell me he's clever doesn't mean I can't tell that he doesn't have a functioning brain. So after HaYmItCh gets back from the parade, he meets his new mentors, Mags and Wyrus. And this is where the cameos really start to wear on me. This reminds me that this is a series with a limited cast of characters. It doesn't make the plot seem cleverly interwoven, it makes the world feel small. But him meeting every single living victor who would eventually be an important character in Catching Fire during his first week in the Capitol is excessive. I had always thought it was over the years that HaYmItCh got to know all these other people, became acquainted, and eventually joined this rebellion plot, and maybe even helped craft it. But instead of this feeling like a believable explanation, this feels like lazy writing to try to shoehorn in the characters who will be important in the rest of the series. It feels like any character who wasn't catching fire, who could possibly have been alive in Sunrise of the Reaping, was put into that book, whether or not it made sense. It does make sense that HaYmItCh would meet these characters before the original trilogy. It does not make sense that he meets them his first week in the capital when he is a tribute. It's not like Katniss wasn't going around meeting a bunch of people when she was a tribute in her first game. She was focused on survival. Also, this doesn't show us how the rebellion started or even how it evolves. It just shows us half the group already established and then HaYmItCh being bluntly asked to join. Also, the Mags and Wiress we meet in this book are so bland. Mags is a normal, kind, motherly woman. Nothing special. Her past in District 4, which is one of the career districts where kids are raised to fight in the games, is never really brought up. It's not relevant. Her potentially being a career because it might be a newer establishment than when she was in the games, but her confirmed to have mentored careers at this point does not color or shape her character. She's just a nice lady and that's it. And the District 12 tributes who hate the careers supposedly never even treat her differently because she previously has mentored careers. And with the young careers being so cartoonishly evil, it feels like she's just I'm not like the other careers. Not like it's an actual well-established dynamic group of people. Again, I feel this book was a missed opportunity to further expand upon the careers instead of making them all dumbly jocks and the butt of all the jokes. Yes, Mags is part of the rebellion, but she's essentially just removed from the rest. And we do get one career tribute who does something rebellious later on, but we don't see her past that one act, and it doesn't really seem to affect HaYmItCh. She doesn't think about the careers differently. The other girl, Maysilee, who witnesses it, doesn't consider this maybe they're also victims too. She's just she's a career. Stupid. I can't believe she rebelled more than you did. It's not interesting. Nothing interesting is done with. Both of these characters are almost unrecognizable from the original trilogy. The reason for this is because they're supposedly broken by the end of this book. But the original personalities were replaced with nothing but the blandest milquetoast. Yes, they didn't start out as the most complex characters in Catching Fire. Mags was a nice old lady who Katniss had difficulty understanding, and Wiress wasn't all there, but they had these features that allowed them to stand out, whereas now they have nothing that makes them stand out. Also, on top of that, there's no reason that Wiress can't have these issues from her Hunger Games and already be like this. And also, thought Mags was had trouble walking and spoke differently because she had previously had a stroke, but now when she was old, but this book feels the need to explain it. We'll get to that later. So the next scene is in the training where Plutarch asks HaYmItCh directly why he doesn't rebel because implicit submission. And I already talked about how the directness felt too on the nose for the theme and that it didn't respect the reader's intelligence. But let me talk more about my in-universe issues with this. Plutarch's boldness in asking HaYmItCh why he doesn't rebel also kind of breaks the world for me. In fact, when Plutarch asked HaYmItCh, I immediately thought this does not feel like the same Panem established in the other books. The characters in this book are way too open and direct in their rebellious comments compared to the other books. The example I gave from Catching Fire was when Katniss and Gale were in the woods so that no one could hear them. The characters in the original trilogy would always go to secure areas before they'd ever think about saying something rebellious. In the Hunger Games, when Katniss first sees the redheaded Avex girl is serving them and she says she recognizes her, everyone acts shocked and explains to Katniss that Avexes are mute slaves as punishments for a crime. Katniss immediately realizes this was a dangerous thing to say, and Peeta helps Katniss cover this up. And when he signals for an explanation once they're alone and Katniss hesitates due to the Capitol potentially listening, he offers that they should go up in the garden on the roof, and he comments how the wind chimes there are so loud. They weren't even speaking of rebelling. Katniss just admitted to knowing someone who had gotten arrested, and even then they were secure location, secure location. The level of care the characters constantly take to keep anything that would be seen as an infraction against the Capitol as a secret is always palpable. This fact paints Katniss's entire personality. It's part of why she keeps to herself. She talks about how, as a small child, she'd blurt out things criticizing the Capitol and that it'd give her mother a heart attack, so she eventually just stopped talking and saying what she thinks in her own home in fear that her sister would repeat her thoughts. In Catching Fire, the characters don't tell Katniss and Peeta about their rebel plot because they fear the Capitol is always listening to those two especially, even though they even know that they don't like the Capitol and would want to rebel. And then in Ballad, Snow may be a privileged Capitol citizen, but he is always careful with his words. And some of it is that he's a manipulative narcissist, but once he is sent off to be a peacekeeper in District 12 as punishment, he is very aware that any rebellious discussion against Capitol could get him killed. He even starts running away at the end because he's afraid he'll be executed by the Capitol for something he did. In the original trilogy, Katniss was afraid that the Capitol would hear her and wouldn't even talk in her own house. And then we have Sunrise. Plutarch straight up asks HaYmItCh why he doesn't rebel in a room filled with peacekeepers when the peacekeepers were just like immediately focused on HaYmItCh 2 seconds before. Like, I don't think they just started spacing out right after. And then in a later scene, Plutarch lets HaYmItCh talk to his girlfriend over the phone in his house when she is currently in the peacekeepers' barracks in District 12, which the Capitol would definitely never learn about. It's not like they would tap a phone, especially in a military base. No, they would never do that. And then immediately Plutarch tells HaYmItCh classified information about the arena and then tells him, "No more implicit submission for you, HaYmItCh AbErNaThY. Blow that water tank sky high. The entire country needs you to." Amazing writing. In contrast, we have an example of how Plutarch tries to show Katniss he's on her side in Catching Fire. Plutarch steps back and pulls out a gold watch on a chain from a vest pocket. He flips open the lid, sees the time, and frowns. "I'll have to be going soon." He turns the watch so I can see the face. It starts at midnight. "That seems late for," I say, but then something distracts me. Plutarch has run his thumb across the crystal face of the watch, and for just a moment an image appears, glowing as if lit by candlelight. It's another Mockingjay, exactly like the pin on my dress, only this one disappears. He snaps the watch closed. "That's very pretty," I say. "Oh, it's more than pretty. It's one of a kind," he says. "If anyone asks about me, say I've gone home to bed. The meetings are supposed to be kept secret, but I thought it'd be safe to tell you." "Yes, your secret's safe with me," I say. As we shake hands, he gives a small bow, a common gesture here in the Capitol. "Well, I'll see you next summer at the games, Katniss. Best wishes on your engagement, and good luck with your mother." "I'll need it," I say. Plutarch disappears, and I wander through the crowd looking for Peeta as strangers congratulate me on my engagement, on my victory at the games, on my choice of lipstick. I respond, but really I'm thinking about Plutarch showing off his pretty one-of-a-kind watch to me. There was something strange about it, almost clandestine. But why? Maybe he thinks someone else will steal his idea of putting a disappearing Mockingjay on a watch face. Yes, he probably paid a fortune for it, and now he can't show it to anyone because he's afraid someone will make a cheap knockoff version. Only in the Capitol. The difference in the level of subtlety and secrecy is astounding. Katniss isn't even sure that Plutarch is a rebel and is signaling that he supports the rebellion. She is left questioning his motives. There is not an opportunity to question any character's motives in Sunrise on the Reaping. They all just plainly state their motives right away, the moment they meet him. Then immediately after Plutarch asks HaYmItCh why he doesn't rebel, a 12-year-old tribute named Ampert asks HaYmItCh to join his group to counter the careers. Ampert tells HaYmItCh to go talk to his father. It is revealed that Ampert's father is Beetee, another throwback character to Catching Fire. So let's see how Beetee talks to Katniss in Catching Fire. So this is a pretty good one-to-one comparison because Beetee talks to Katniss in Catching Fire in the Tribute Training Center, and he talks to HaYmItCh in the Tribute Center on Sunrise on the Reaping. So let's see how he talks to Katniss in Catching Fire. Then he talks about his recent success creating a musical chip that's tiny enough to be concealed in a flake of glitter, but can hold hours of songs. I remember Octavia talking about this during the wedding shoot, and I see a possible chance to allude to the uprising. "Oh yeah, my prep team was all upset a few months ago, I think, because they couldn't get a hold of that," I say casually. "I guess a lot of orders from District 3 were getting backed up." Beetee examines me under his glasses. "Yes, Did you have similar backups in coal production this year, he asked. No. Well, we lost a couple of weeks when they brought in a new head peacekeeper and his crew, but nothing major, I say. To the production, I mean. 2 weeks of sitting around your house doing nothing just means 2 weeks of being hungry for most people. I think they understand what I'm trying to say, that we've had no uprising. Oh, that's a shame, says Wirus in a slightly disappointed voice. I found your district very... She trails off, distracted by something in her head. Interesting, fills in Beatty. We both did. I feel bad knowing that their district must have suffered much worse than ours. I feel I have to defend my people. Well, there aren't many of us in 12, I say. Not that you'd know it nowadays by the size of the peacekeeping force, but I guess we're interesting enough. And this is how Beatty, the same character, talks to HaYmItCh in the Tribute Center in Sunrise on the Reaping. I give up on being covert and approach him. You're amp'R's father? I am, and no doubt you're wondering why I'm here, HaYmItCh. Beatty removes his glasses and polishes them on his shirt. It's because I'm being punished for coming up with a plan to sabotage the capital's communication system. I'm too valuable to kill, but my son is disposable. That's pretty much answers my question. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. He's a great kid. He is. Beatty's eyes find amp'R sitting across from Maysilee on the bleachers, chattering away while she weaves the cord into patterns. And they made you be his mentor, I ask? It's part of the punishment. Watching what are almost certainly the last hours of my son's life. They even gave me a booth in training, which mentors don't traditionally attend, so I wouldn't miss a minute. If I wasn't here to witness it, there would be no point. I can't think of anything to say to comfort him, but I tried. This isn't your fault. But it is. Entirely. I took a risk. I didn't suspect that I'd be found out until the reaping. The timing was calculated. If I had known, I could have killed myself and amp'R would be safe at home. That's how snow works. He drops his head, resting his fingertips on the wooden counter to steady himself. I wait for him to disintegrate, but he only says, would you like to learn how to turn a potato into a battery? Light can be important in the arena. Again, can you spot the difference? I mean, I know the approaches are so similar, so you may be confused. I wouldn't blame you. So let me spell it out for you, like Colin spelled out the theme of this book 50 different times in a row. Apparently, in this new book, secrecy, out the window. Subtlety, nah. Beatty just meets this 16-year-old boy he's never talked to before and immediately spills his entire backstory to him. It must have been that over the 25 years between this book and Catching Fire, Beatty realized, hey, maybe I shouldn't just say whatever I think, because the Capitol is listening, especially in training centers. And it's revealed Beatty also has a pregnant wife, so my assumption is he kept stupidly just telling random kids his entire backstory and rebel plots until he got both his wife and other kid executed and finally learned his lesson. Silly Beatty. And then the Capitol kept him alive even though they had no more leverage on him and still trusted him with designing important infrastructure. Silly Capitol. Even then, the idea that they know he is a rebel and keep him around to design their infrastructure is unbelievably dumb. My point is, the previous books established a 1984 Big Brother is watching atmosphere that this book killed for me. I could not be immersed in this book because, quite frankly, I could not buy into the fact that this was the same world. Anyway, then HaYmItCh talks to amp'R about their group to oppose the careers, and they try to think of names and end up picking the Newcomers based on the miners' nickname for the new miners, Nettie Newcomer, based on HaYmItCh's suggestion, because main character gotta think of things. It feels so juvenile, so silly. It feels more middle grade than young adult. This is clearly in here because the author tells us that it's meant to be them going against the implicit submission that the non-careers won't work together. But I have 2 issues with this. 1, all 32 of the Newcomers are perfectly nice, good kids who never at any point think of turning on each other. This is a death tournament where there can only be one winner, and this never comes up. In Catching Fire, when Katniss is allied with Finnick, she is constantly thinking of whether he might kill her and considers killing him herself. Then when the group expands, she and Peeta discuss when they should leave because they know this game is to the death. Yes, they make allies and even have fun moments together, but they never forget why they are in the arena and prioritize the life that they want to spare. In this book, it feels like Collins wasn't interested in any of that. and just wanted to write all the kids as pure good. And honestly, them thinking about betraying each other would not have made them bad. It would have been realistic to their circumstance. In Ballad, Lucy Gray says that the arena makes people do things that they would never have done if left alone. In this book, the arena has no effect on anyone really at all. I guess Lucy Gray was wrong. The kids in her timeline just suck. And the second issue is, in Catching Fire, we already got HaYmItCh's entire game summarized, so we know he can't join the Newcomers. Yes, Collins is able to change a lot by saying the footage that Katniss and Peeta saw in Catching Fire was edited to hide certain things and rearrange to give different implications. However, the previous footage still has limits. Collins makes sure in this book to kind of allude to AI and say how they don't have that level of technology when it comes to editing footage because it was lost in the war and apocalypse that led to Panem. So she can't just do whatever she wants in this book. So while she wants to have the Newcomers, she can't actually allow HaYmItCh to join them, resulting in them just feeling tacked on. They're a shallow element of the story that feels like a perfect group of good kids who lack any real depth. After the training, HaYmItCh is taken to Plutarch's house to meet President Coriolanus Snow, the big bad villain. So while I find the fact that HaYmItCh can just be taken to Plutarch's house kind of weird, since the games before this and after this, we would never have fathomed the tributes being taken to a private residence house in the capital, but ignoring that, I will say Plutarch living in a rich mansion filled with books from history fits his character, considering he knew about the Roman Empire in the original trilogy. But anyway, back to HaYmItCh meeting President Snow. Do you remember the President Snow in the original trilogy? So precise with his words and his image. Do you remember how in Ballad, Coriolanus Snow was so careful about his every word as to uphold this said image? We'll worry about that no more, because now every character constantly says what's on their mind without any filter, including President Snow. In Ballad, when Snow is 18, he is so meticulous of every word he says to ensure he crafts a very good reputation. In Ballad, when Snow is 18, he is so meticulous in what he set. In Ballad, when Snow is 18, a teenager, he is so meticulous with what he says to ensure he crafts a very planned, good reputation. Even at age 8, he didn't join in bullying the District 2 kid, Sejanus, not because he wasn't prejudiced against him, because he was prejudiced and didn't think Sejanus should be there with them at the capital school, but because he wanted to be seen as above bullying. He saw bullying as beneath him and wanted people to think that of him too. At 8 years old. And then when he's grown up constantly hungry due to the war, he restrains himself in school when the only time he's guaranteed to get a meal for his school lunch, he restrains himself to take smaller, more reasonable portions for a growing teenage boy as to not appear as if he's starving outside of school. The last thing Snow wants to appear is weak. Then in Catching Fire, after the first games where Katniss refused to kill Peeta and they threatened to both eat the poison berries, which resulted in both of them being allowed to live, Snow pays Katniss a visit because this outsmarting of the games has caused issues in the district. While he is honest with her, he is still very meticulous in what he says in order to manipulate Katniss to do what he wants. He doesn't talk to Katniss about how she reminds him of his ex-girlfriend, and he never acts vulnerable. He never even lacks decorum, being nothing but polite to Katniss's mom when she brings them tea and cookies. And then in Sunrise, after HaYmItCh disrespects Snow during the Chariot ride, which is already its own issue, Snow arrives to his meeting with HaYmItCh, which even with the disrespect, I don't necessarily think Snow would personally meet with HaYmItCh as opposed to having him killed in the games without warning. This seems kind of like something Snow would consider beneath him. Why would he meet with just a tribute versus Katniss, who was a victor who actually has caused a lot of issues? HaYmItCh's thing was just covered up, so whatever. I don't know why Snow wouldn't just have HaYmItCh immediately killed in the games, but I digress. So in their meeting, Snow arrives and just starts barfing all over Plutarch's house. He then asks for milk to help with his illness, and HaYmItCh chugs the milk and says there is none so that Snow can't get any. Is this the same series? Are these the same characters? And then Snow just like continues barfing everywhere and is like, you think I look bad? You should see the parade master. Must have been some bad oysters. It's ridiculous. Can you imagine Snow coming to Katniss's house and catching fire and just start projectile vomiting everywhere and being like, you think I look bad? You should see Seneca Crane. No, you can't? Why? Probably because it'd be stupid. And HaYmItCh chugging the milk just feels childish, and not in an age-accurate way, but in a way that would be for a children's book. Like, oh, the mean villain wants milk, I'm gonna drink it so he can't get any. It'd be like when Snow tells Katniss's mom that he would like some tea and cookies if Katniss was like, oh, look over there, and then ate them all when he turned away. Now, yes, it would be out of character for Katniss's character personally, but it also completely ruins the tone of the scene. It takes something serious and makes it comical. And then Snow sees HaYmItCh's butt-ugly necklace and asks to look at it and sees that there's an inscription on it from Lenore Dove, HaYmItCh's girlfriend. And Snow immediately figures out that Lenore Dove is a covey like Snow's ex, Lucy Gray. And he starts ranting about how the games are good for HaYmItCh and that HaYmItCh really dodged a bullet. And then he just like describes Lucy Gray as like, your girl must be just like that. And it's like, what is happening? Yeah, I'm pretty sure in Mockingjay, when Peeta is being tortured, Snow is just standing over him being like, you know, Peeta, you really lucked out getting captured and tortured because Katniss, well, she reminds me of my ex. And, well, I mean, we only dated for like a month, decades ago. But, well, oof, you really dodged a bullet here getting tortured. And then he proceeds to projectile vomit on Peeta's face. Yeah, that's what happened. In fact, that's probably why Peeta went crazy. I'd go crazy too if old Snow kept talking about his ex-girlfriend projectile vomiting everywhere. This is a dystopian novel that is supposed to be a critique of certain themes about society and the world, and this one is specifically about propaganda. So while in the original trilogy, Snow's motivation is that he believes the games keep the districts in line by giving them fear, but just enough hope with one victor to keep them doing what they want, which also kind of goes in line with the whole propaganda theme because he's using the games as propaganda. But the point is that his motivation ties into the themes more than him personally. And then in Ballad, it literally says Snow did not care to talk much about Lucy Gray with anyone. But now he's rambling about her with HaYmItCh. But now he's just randomly bringing her up with HaYmItCh. Yeah, that seems like something he would do. I understand that now that Ballad is written, that we get more specifics into Snow's backstory, and I enjoyed Ballad as a character study. However, this level of personalness that Snow addresses HaYmItCh with, I feel undermines the initial focus of the original trilogy being about the ideology of Snow and the capital as a whole, which was about oppressing the districts to keep power and using the games as propaganda to do so. In Sunrise, it comes across that Snow is just petty about his ex. And even in Ballad, when Snow is going through this tumultuous romance that ends up failing, it feels like there's still a more even focus with the ideology, and it's not just him randomly being upset about his ex. Like, he still has his whole ideology behind why he's like this. The way Beatty just tells HaYmItCh his entire backstory, how he and Plutarch immediately trust HaYmItCh with the rebel plot, and how Snow specifically meets with HaYmItCh and talks about his ex, these things are all out of character and unnecessarily direct and honest. All three men immediately trust HaYmItCh with information that should not be given out lightly. It feels like they know he's the main character and that they need to center their intention on him, which ruins my immersion. So Snow basically told HaYmItCh that HaYmItCh will die in the arena, and if he doesn't, Snow will kill his loved ones. This information, combined with the rebels talking to HaYmItCh, makes him decide he needs to pretend he is trying in the game so that he can better help with the rebel plan to make the games fail, and then HaYmItCh plans to die. This also is essentially an excuse for HaYmItCh to never worry about how his actions will affect his loved ones at home. After the stupid conversation, Snow has a little girl brought out as a body double for Luella to replace her due to the carriage accident causing her death. This little girl clearly has been starved and abused and is hooked up with an earpiece and some weird tech stuff which makes her unable to speak about her past. She's also, on top of that, mentally unwell. She's an interesting enough character, with the other District 12 tributes at first disliking her, seeing her as capital maid and a plant, and then they realize she's a victim too. Probably from a District 11 rebel family. Since they can't figure out her name and they don't want to just call her Luella, they decide to call her Lulu. Her character can be entertaining and had a lot of potential, but she becomes lost in the sea of too many characters, and I feel she often comes across as more weird and goofy than tragic. The tone didn't work for me, like seeing her grabbing a snake and playing around with it, and like how she's like running around trying to like eat everything poisonous in the arena. Didn't come off as sad, tragic little girl. It came off as more like shenanigan-y, which maybe that makes me heartless, but like it didn't work. It didn't work. This is an interesting concept, but I feel it was glossed over. Then that night, Wirus makes a power go out in the tribute center because the Capitol has a crap security system and is full-on incompetent in this book. This allows Beatty to sneak in and tell HaYmItCh, the random 16-year-old he just met, about their plan to destroy the arena by drowning the mainframe. On top of that, the rebel plan seems incomplete. They want to destroy the arena, but they don't seem to have any plan to rescue anyone after that. They essentially tell HaYmItCh it's a suicide mission for him. It seems purely just to make a point and not to save any of the children, who most likely would all end up executed due to the plot. I don't think District 13 would be capable of rescuing them 25 years before the original trilogy. So all the rebels just seem willing to blow up the arena and die and save no one. Which also, since Wirus is HaYmItCh's mentor, it would have made more sense for Beatty to cut the power and for her to explain the plan because she has more of a reason to be in that area. But, you know, whatever. We don't use logic here. Then there's more training with the cheesy newcomers and the dung job bully characters' careers. Oh, also all the tributes have color-coded uniforms based on their district in training, and also for every single event leading up to the games, and then in the games they continue to be color-coded, which is different than the original trilogy, where they could wear what they wanted to training. For the costumes, it didn't have to be a specific color, it just had to evoke their district. And then in the arena, they all had matching outfits to make it fair. So this not only gives some tributes better camouflage than others, it also doesn't help the readers since we can't see them. The colored outfits doesn't help you when reading a book. So to me, it seems like it's meant for the inevitable movie that was announced before the book even came out, which kind of bothers me. Not gonna lie, like why'd you do that? Then HaYmItCh and the District 12 tributes talk about their private Gamemaker sessions. This is a private, untelevised session when they show a skill to the game makers that could potentially help them in the arena. And the game makers give out a public score for each tribute from 1 to 12 for the sponsors to consider when spending their money to send gifts to the tributes they're rooting for and potentially betting will win. So the entire session is a secret. No one can talk about it afterwards, but it still is important. This is Katniss's private session in her first book. After about 15 minutes, they call my name. I smooth my hair, set my shoulders back, and walk into the gymnasium. Instantly, I know I'm in trouble. They've been here too long. The game makers sat through 23 other demonstrations, had too much wine, most of them, want more than anything to go home. There's nothing I can do but continue with the plan. I walk to the archery station. Oh, the weapons! I've been itching to get my hands on them for days. Bows made of wood and plastic and metal and materials I can't even name. Arrows with feathers cut in flawless uniform lines. I choose a bow, string it, and sling the matching quiver of arrows over my shoulder. There's a shooting range, but it's much too limited. Standard bullseyes and human silhouettes. I walk to the center of the gymnasium and pick my first target, the dummy used for knife practice. Even as I pull back the bow, I know something is wrong. The string's tighter than the one I used at home. The arrow is more rigid. I miss the dummy by a couple of inches and lose what little attention I had been commanding. For a moment, I'm humiliated. I shoot again and again until I get the feel of these new weapons. Back in the center of the gymnasium, I take my initial position and skew the dummy right through the heart. Then I sever the rope that holds the sandbag for boxing, and the bag splits open as it slams to the ground. Without pausing, I shoulder roll forward, come up on one knee, and send an arrow into one of the hanging lights high above the gymnasium floor. A shower of sparks bursts from the fixture. It's excellent shooting. I turn to the game makers. A few are nodding approval, but the majority of them are fixated on a roast pig that has just arrived at their banquet table. Suddenly, I am furious that with my life on the line, they don't even have the decency to pay attention to me. That I'm being upstaged by a dead pig. My heart starts to pound. I can feel my face burning. Without thinking, I pull an arrow from my quiver and send it straight at the game maker's table. I hear shouts of alarm as people stumble back. The arrow skewers the apple in the pig's mouth and pins it to the wall behind it. Everyone stares at me in disbelief. Thank you for your consideration, I say. Then I give a slight bow and walk straight towards the exit without being dismissed. So Katniss went in as the 24th and final tribute, and the game makers are barely paying attention to her and eating and getting drunk, which makes her upset, but that's not relevant right now. What's relevant is the game makers are just chilling and eating, watching from a platform as these kids come in and perform physical skills for them to watch. They do not talk to the tributes besides dismissing them, though they don't get the chance with Katniss. And this is not an interview. It is a physical demonstration of practical skills for the games. This is also after 23 other tributes have performed. And then when HaYmItCh and the other tributes are discussing what they'll do for their sessions, they all focus on their skills. HaYmItCh considers axe throwing. Then for HaYmItCh's private session, which is after 47 other tributes, since for his games, the tributes are doubled, this is what happens. The gym's deserted when I walk out, my footsteps echoing off the walls, except for the neat rows of game makers in their bleachers. The head game maker, Faustina Gripper, a short, ample woman with close-cropped metallic silver and gold curls, is distinguished by the purple fur collar on her snowy robe. She appraises me, then commands, "Tell us about yourself." I cock my head, look her dead in the eye, and say, "I'm HaYmItCh AbErNaThY from District 12. I shouldn't be here. I was reaped illegally, but no one cares. My neighbor, Luella McCoy, was the only person here I gave a hang about. But you killed her and brought in a body double, so that kind of frees me up to win these games." "And what makes you think you can do that? We haven't noticed that you possess any outstanding skills," the head game maker says. "Really?" I smirk. "Because from where I'm standing, looks like I came up with 31 people who've promised to defend me. But maybe that strategy's a little too subtle for you." Her mouth tightens. "And you're willing to let them die?" "Why not, lady? You are." They dismiss me. Sorry, I'm being obnoxious. They dismiss me. I'm hoping to pull off unlikable but focused on winning the games. If I can score in the mid-range, maybe I can still get a handful of sponsors. On the way out the door, the peacekeepers collect my token for inspection. I run my fingers over the inscription and press my lips against the bird before placing it in a little basket marked with my name. It kills me having to let it go, knowing they may tag it as unfair and dispose of it. And besides the heartbreak, losing it means I will have to find another way to make a fire to carry out Beatty's plot. On the other hand, it's the capital, and all they may see is a pretty necklace. Either way, my neck feels naked without it. None of us talk much on the van ride home. After a dinner of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes, we gather around the television in the living room for a special announcement of our individual scores. On a scale of 1 to 12, the careers mostly land in the 8 to 11 range, with the exception of District 11, who bring in similar numbers. The newcomers generally manage between 4 and 7. We're announced last. Maysilee and White each get 6. Lulu pulls a 3. And me, I get a 1. The private session is changed from a demonstration of skill to HaYmItCh talking about his motivation. No wonder he gets a 1. He didn't do anything. It's not set up that this session is different than 25 years later. In fact, it is set up that it will be the same and that they're supposed to demonstrate a skill that will help them survive. So then, by having the head game maker directly as HaYmItCh to tell them about himself, it feels like a cheap setup for what the author wants to happen, and that is for him to convince them of his motivation that he is going to try from now on, not for him to demonstrate a skill, which is what it should be. Also, the head game maker didn't need a name and a full description. She never shows up again, and by naming all these irrelevant characters, it just bloats the story, which is an issue this book has. In both The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, Katniss's sessions are both standout dramatic moments, with her getting the highest score each time with an 11 in The Hunger Games and a 12 in Catching Fire, which Peeta also gets. So it feels like the next dramatic thing that hasn't been done is for HaYmItCh to score a 1. But he also has to be skilled with actual abilities like throwing an axe. So Collins needs him to get a low score for upsetting the game makers, and it ends up just being a conversation of him pretending to only be out for himself. It's so dumb. The game makers are fully paying attention. They ask him to tell him about himself when really they should be so sick of this. Why are they like just standing there like NPCs waiting for him to talk to them? Whereas previously they felt more alive, being drinking and partying and treating it as irrelevant. Also, the game makers criticize HaYmItCh for wanting to use the other kids to allow himself to live and them to die, which is exactly the point of the Hunger Games. The game makers should be rejoicing that at least one of these kids wants to only look out for himself, because one of the points of the games is to make the districts hate each other. There is no reason for her to criticize him for that. It would have made more sense if she was like, how do you know they won't betray you? Not for her to be like, how could you betray them? Girl, that's what you want. What are you doing? Later on, the District 12 tributes get their hair and makeup done by their prep teams again, but this time for their interviews. The drunk stylist is not showing up and everyone freaks out, including the prep team, who is doing because they're doing this for a grade. One of the panicked preps calls her sister, who comes with their aunt and uncle's black tie dress clothes, and it's lucky that they're black because in this book, everyone is required to be color-coded for some reason. And guess who her sister is? Effie Trinket, another fan service character who is apparently older than HaYmItCh. Anyway, she brings him outfits and HaYmItCh wears a vest with some sort of alcohol design in it. And it's to fit his rascal vibe that he and his group decided he should go for with his interview. Honestly, I don't mind the overall situation of them needing to compensate for the crappy stylist, but of course Effie Trinket needed to show up because we need every possible character from the original trilogy in here. They go to their interviews. There's a buffet where HaYmItCh and BD talk. In the previous books, the tributes all sit in the background of the interviews the whole time, while in this book, they get to mingle backstage. This change is actually explained well. Since this is the 50th Hunger Games with double the tributes, that means 48 tributes have to be interviewed. So they have 2 intermissions to break up the programming, so this change is explained well in my opinion. Though I still think HaYmItCh and BD talk too openly for what should be a heavily armed and crowded film studio. Also, the drunk stylist finally shows up with a bunch of living reptiles for what he considers live reptile fashion. And there's a comedic scene where the peacekeepers are trying to arrest him. And then Drusilla, the jerk lady, yells at them to shoot him. And then Lulu gets a snake to wear and is showing it off, which is nice to see her happy. But it's just so silly that, like, it makes her character feels more silly in a lot of the scenes she's in than tragic. In the original trilogy, the interviewer, Caesar Flickerman, is characterized as trying to help make all the tributes look good. However, this one starts with Caesar making fun of the dumb District 1 career named Panache. Flickerman makes fun of Panache, and the audience laughs at Panache. And to be honest, I kind of felt bad for Panache. He's a kid being sent to his death, and they all laugh at him. And me feeling bad for him is a plus for the book. And it said the Capitol is trying to knock the career districts down a peg because they are acting too capital. That's fine. I think that's an interesting thing to explore, except I do feel the book actually plays into this by also portraying the careers as big dumb idiots behind the scenes. They actually are as stupid as Caesar is portraying them to be. If Collins actually wanted to explore propaganda, she could have had them actually be more complex behind the scenes and just have the Capitol portraying them as dumb as part of the propaganda. Also, the careers have been trained since childhood to fight to the death, so it doesn't make sense for them to be imbeciles. If anything, warriors should be trained for quick thinking under pressure. I get that not all of them are portrayed as like as stupid as Panache, but still, it's like, oh, you want to portray propaganda? You can make these characters complex. Oh, hold on. We're not going that far. Like, they are one note. It's bad the Capitol is portraying them as one note, but it's accurate. Then throughout the interviews, the rest of the careers are careful not to seem brutish, and when District 3 goes, Amber talks about the Newcomers alliance. This makes the careers look bad, but also the Newcomers are so sickly sweet perfect, it's annoying. It's characterized as all of the kids talking about their plan to team up, and they all focus on the group and not themselves, even though only one person can win. It feels unrealistic to me that all these kids are so uninterested in their own survival. Then when we get to District 12, the tributes actually do talk about themselves, because they are the characters that Collins cares about enough to write and not just have them talk about being a newcomer. And don't get me wrong, She doesn't need to describe all the interviews. She doesn't do that in the original trilogy. It's just that in the first book, she gives readers ideas of some of the other tributes interviews to paint an overall picture, but also how the kids are different. In this book, she goes out of her way to tell us that all of the newcomers are solely focusing on their alliance and steering the conversation back to the alliance. It's only until we get to District 12 where the kids who are also newcomers are allowed to be individuals. There is no in-universe reason why the kids from District 12 get to be special, while all the other newcomers are instructed not to. The only explanation is Collins cares more about those characters. At least that's how it came across for me. Now, for HaYmItCh's interview, he did tell the newcomers he won't be joining them, so he does have an excuse to act differently. He tells them it's because his score of 1 makes him a target to the Gamemakers, but in actuality, it's because he needs to be alone to destroy the generator, and also he does have a target on his back for disrespecting Snow. The only tribute who knows the full truth is iMpLiCiT, who is in on the rebel plan, and also is targeted to die for being BD's son. This is the perfect time to talk about how I don't like this so-called HaYmItCh as a protagonist. You know how I said the good guys were just pure good to the point of unrealistic? This is also true when it comes to HaYmItCh. In the original trilogy, within the first couple pages, Katniss tells us about how she once tried to drown the kitten her sister brought home. This is not because she's a psycho, but because she had been living on survival mode and saw the worm-infested kitten as another mouth to feed. However, this clearly signals to the reader that while Katniss may be our protagonist, that doesn't mean we should just agree with her. Then throughout the series, Katniss isn't always a beacon of normality. In the first game, she wishes a nearby girl tribute would be killed for starting a fire and signaling their location. In Catching Fire, when Snow threatens her, she wants to abandon everyone else in Panem to save just herself and her loved ones. And she considers killing Finnick multiple times when they're in the arena together despite being allies. Yes, the book is YA and she never crosses the line to evil. She does feel like a product of growing up in survival mode in a world where she always has to watch what she says and is affected by the horrifying situation she's in. Yes, she comes out good and inspires others, but she isn't above the world, she's part of it. On the other hand, this supposed HaYmItCh we get in this book never even thinks anything morally questionable. The moral quandaries created by the Hunger Games never even affects his thinking, let alone his actions. Yes, the end of the book is tragic, and he then does allow himself to be used in a futile attempt to save the ones he loves, but that part felt rushed and honestly a little too late for me. And it was all just like him kind of just being a sad sack pushed around and playing along. It wasn't him like hurting, thinking bad things about good people. For his interview, he decides to put on a front to appear like a jerk to appeal to the Capitol sponsors, but he doesn't actually commit to it. This character cannot even pretend to not be a perfect, good, nice guy. It's so cheesy in my opinion. In Catching Fire, it is said we get to see one full exchange in HaYmItCh's interview, which is, it starts with the interviewer Caesar. So HaYmItCh, what do you think of the games having 100% more competitors than usual? Asks Caesar. HaYmItCh shrugs. I don't see that it makes much a difference. They'll still be 100% as stupid as usual, so I figured the odds will be roughly the same. I keep changing the accents, I'm just living my best life. Honestly, it is a clever response. Katniss and Peeta also comment on how it's very in character for HaYmItCh to behave that way. It is also the best piece of dialogue in the interview in the Sunrise on the Reaping part because, of course, all the best things come from Catching Fire, and the things added to it in this book only make it worse, including that line. So before his interview, he tells one of the newcomers who he barely knows, "Listen, I'm going to be a real jerk in my interview. It's something my team worked up, but I will never hurt you, okay? Or any of the newcomers, I promise." Which, this is whatever. The newcomer also unshakably trusts HaYmItCh, though, despite barely knowing him, which, it's dumb. Why would you trust this guy you don't know? The worst part is when he's supposedly coming off as a jerk for the Capitol audience, which I know he was going more for Rascal, but still, when he's even putting on a front, he has to make sure to reassure everyone he would never hurt a newcomer, which somehow appeals to the audience who is excited to watch kids forcibly fight to the death. Like, why would they be into that? Why are they like, oh my gosh, I want to sponsor this kid who's not going to kill people, even though I want to watch people get brutally murdered? That's like my thing. So you remember the witty and arrogant line I just read in Catching Fire? Let's see how Collins walks it back and diminished it. Also, I want to clarify. My issue isn't that we're in HaYmItCh's head and see it's a front. My issue is all the qualifiers that he says out loud for the audience to hear. Caesar in recovery mode jumps right in. So, HaYmItCh, what do you think of the games having 100% more competitors than usual? This is the first time they will hear me speak, and I want to make a lasting impression. But suddenly, I'm not thinking of great Uncle Silas. I'm thinking of Woodbine Chance, who should have been standing here in my place. He was always walking a line of trouble, but people liked him, especially the girls. Too young to be considered a real danger, but certainly a rascal. I give a shrug and let a little of that Chance attitude slip in. I don't see that makes much a difference. They'll still be 100% as stupid as usual, so I figure the odds will be roughly the same. An appreciative chuckle runs through the audience. I give him a half smile. I'm speaking of the careers, of course. Well, it isn't common knowledge, but I've heard you've had some run-ins with one of the careers. Panache, maybe? Caesar asks. I come back with, heard you did too. Caesar laughs along with the audience. Yeah, I'm not on good terms with any of the careers, but the newcomers are plenty smart and 100% safe with me. This boy cannot even pretend to say something bad about the other good guys in this book. He can't even pretend to not actively care about them. He didn't even have to say something bad about them specifically. He could just not brought up how he cares about them, but no. We can't have that. It's as if someone decided the characters in the previous novels had too many flaws and that it'd be better just to get rid of the flaws. You know how the original HaYmItCh was actually a jerk a lot of time? Well, this new and improved HaYmItCh can't even pretend to be a jerk. I understand it's a wall he puts up, but really he can't even pretend. This knockoff HaYmItCh is such a nothing protagonist. He does not have any flaws besides being an idiot, which is not intentional. At least does not seem intentional to me. So then Discount HaYmItCh talks about how he made the Gamemakers mad and is a troublemaker who makes white liquor after school for the Peacekeepers. He points to people in the crowd saying they're also troublemakers and gets the crowd loving him. Caesar calls him a rascal, which Drusilla probably fed him the line, and that's it. This part is fine, nothing special, but nothing of concern. My issue is he's supposed to come across as charismatic and clever, but it doesn't come across that way to me. This is a common issue to have with informed, charismatic, and clever characters, and this book is no exception. Also, the original book, Katniss's nervousness in the interview is palpable to the readers. She does not want to give these people a glimpse into her past, but she's also afraid she'll be hated and get no sponsors. This is important to her survival, and she doesn't know how to do it. And then they're calling Katniss Everdeen, and I feel myself as if in a dream, standing and making my way center stage. I shake Caesar's outstretched hand, and he has the good grace not to immediately wipe his off on his suit. So, Katniss, the capital must be quite a change from District 12. What's impressed you the most since you've arrived here? Asked Caesar. What did he say? It's as if the words make no sense. My mouth has gone as dry as salt. I desperately find Cinna in the crowd and lock eyes with him. I imagine the words coming from his lips. What's impressed you most since you've arrived here? I've racked my brain for something that made me happy here. Be honest, I think. Be honest. I don't need to read anymore. The point is, you can tell how nervous she is and how important this situation is and how high the stakes are. Well, in Sunrise, HaYmItCh is calm and nails it. I understand that Katniss has stage fright and HaYmItCh doesn't, but if the character isn't nervous and easily succeeds, I won't be nervous either, and I won't care that he easily succeeds because that's not engaging. Everything comes so easily for him. I don't feel the tension. I think Collins could have easily made it so the Capital Sins didn't like him, considering he spit in their face, and make the Capitol initially hostile to him. Have there be consequences for his actions. Make HaYmItCh actually have to work to sway the audience instead of already having an unearned good reputation. Also, he didn't even need to win them over. Maybe just let him fail and face the consequences for his previous actions. Then part of the edit of the footage in the Catching Fire could have been making him look better than he actually did. That evening, they go to Plutarch's mansion to get headshots, which feels pretty easy, but I guess Plutarch can just invite essentially high-profile prisoners into his house whenever he wants. Good for him. The first time was at least at Snow's request, But now Snow's just like having a sleepover. So Plutarch pulls HaYmItCh aside and lets him talk on the phone with his girlfriend Lenore Dove, which the Capitol definitely would not find out from tapping the phone, considering she's also in a military base. And she does tell him that she's in the Peacekeeper's prison, which is why she has phone access. They both blame themselves for the other's predicament and declare their undying love and promise to haunt each other as ghosts when they die. And it's over the top cheesy, and it makes it hard to be invested in their relationship because it doesn't feel tangible. It's just... It just feels like dramatic declarations. After the phone call ends, Plutarch then, right next to his phone, tells HaYmItCh not to implicitly submit and gives him advice on how to destroy the arena. I already told you why I hate this, but, I'm just giving you the timeline. The next day, the games start. Effie comes at the last minute to send HaYmItCh off, which is nice, and then HaYmItCh is in the arena. So the arena part starts pretty far in the novel, so hopefully this is quick. So HaYmItCh's games are already described in Catching Fire, and honestly, while the overall game sounded exciting, HaYmItCh's perspective didn't sound that exciting. Yes, Sunrise is able to change a lot given the footage Katniss saw was heavily edited Capitol propaganda, but there are still limitations. He initially gets all the supplies he could need, weapons and food, and heads in the opposite direction of everyone else being unbothered for most of his game. While Katniss was often part of the action, with several exceptions, HaYmItCh is completely fine for most of it. So having the plan to break the arena is the only way to make the games more exciting in this first-person perspective novel. But honestly, his plan felt too in your face given it's a televised arena. I found it hard to believe that the game makers allowed him to constantly get away with so much. In Catching Fire, we got the impression he did one wrong thing at the end by using the force field to win. But in this book, we learn he was constantly breaking the rules. I will say in Catching Fire, when Katniss and Peeta see HaYmItCh's game, they say what he did was almost as bad as them, which I didn't think made sense. All he did was allow an opponent's weapon to bounce off a force field and kill her. When it's already been established that tributes have dug up the mines around the platforms where everyone's raised up, that's only supposed to be active at the beginning of the game to keep people from jumping off early, and reactivated and put around the arena as traps, and that characters have electrocuted each other. But somehow what HaYmItCh did is the bad one. What HaYmItCh did seems unremarkable compared to that. And I don't believe it made the Capitol look bad. But all because of that one action, his family and girlfriend are killed. But his backstory was so small that what he specifically did didn't matter as much as the fact that it angered the Capitol and made them look bad. I could overlook something as small in an otherwise great book. However, in Sunrise, what he does really matters. It is the climax of the story. And it swings in the entire other direction, but where he is so unbelievably rebellious that he should not have gotten as far as he did. When the games start, the arena is supposed to be so beautiful to the point of distraction. In fact, the air is supposed to be laced with gas that adds to the pleasant feeling. I feel this could have been a really cool setup for HaYmItCh to constantly have to fight to focus and to not trust his surroundings, but instead he just realizes this when a random bunny just hops next to him, and he's like, oh gosh, I need to pay attention. And then the fumes in the air and the beauty of his surroundings never affect him again. This could have been a really disturbing and atmospheric setting, but instead it's irrelevant. HaYmItCh then gets his supplies and goes in the opposite direction of everyone else. And then he drinks some water from a stream and conveniently immediately sees a bunny drink from it. And then the bunny just dies right next to him. HaYmItCh is like, oh shoot, it must be poison. And luckily, he has an antidote in his backpack. Speaking of his backpack, along with the antidote to the poison, it's filled with food and tons of water. I understand that based on Catching Fire, HaYmItCh had to get some good supplies. Katniss did too. But even then, she didn't get a bow right away, and she almost died of dehydration immediately in the game. Yes, HaYmItCh is poisoned, but he already has the antidote, and just spends one bad night curled up in a bush. It feels like everything comes so much easier for him, while Katniss had to struggle for so much for every little thing. For example, in the games, HaYmItCh gets so much food from sponsors. It felt endless. He never had to wait for a meal, whereas Katniss in her game has much more limited gifts. She almost dies of dehydration because she has limited sponsors, and the real HaYmItCh, as her mentor, is saving her money for a gift he knows she can't get herself. And later on, when she is gifted food, it's when she is actively playing up the romance for the Capitol. She doesn't get all this food for nothing. She has to play into it. Discount HaYmItCh in Sunrise never really plays into appealing to the viewers for his gift after his interviews. It starts and ends there. So his endless gifts feel unearned, and wherever a newcomer comes up to him, he has so many gifts and they have almost nothing and they comment on it. I don't get why he has so many sponsors. Also, this series is called The Hunger Games. So as you can guess, hunger is very prevalent. Katniss almost starved to death as a child when her father died and her mother checked out mentally. She survived because Peeta purposely burned bread so that he could pretend to feed it the pigs, but actually gave it to Katniss even though he knew his mother would beat him for it. Their connection started with him keeping her from starving. Katniss had to learn to feed herself and her family. In Ballad, Snow grew up during the war, having to survive off their stockpile of beans or something like that. He goes to school hungry but still eats limited servings of his provided school lunch as not to appear desperate. He saves his food for Lucy Gray to help her in the game, despite starving himself. He even has a flashback of during the war how he saw a rich capital man sawing off a dead woman's leg to feed his family. Even the rich were not spared from hunger in this world. Hunger is a constant theme in this series, and while HaYmItCh grew up poor and his father too died, he still had a capable mother and never appeared to have gone hungry. This is fine. We don't need every character to have starved as a child, but maybe during the games it would have been a good opportunity for him to finally experience hunger. Instead of being constantly given gifts of food so much that he feeds some of it to a bunny because he's a frickin' Disney princess, he could have started with food as said in Catching Fire, but be unused to having to ration it and eventually have to pay for it later. And the lack of hunger is a critique that in another book I wouldn't mention. Not every book should feature a protagonist going hungry, but in this series it feels like an important aspect missed. Anyway, that night 75% of HaYmItCh watched the faces of the sky to see who died and learns that why the other boy from 12 died. Then eventually Lulu finds him, having tracked him down probably due to the voice in her ear. They spend the next day together heading north. He is going north because of the rebel plan to blow up the water tank, which he was told would be in that direction because he doesn't have any plans that he makes for himself and he doesn't figure out how to do any of the plans for himself. He's explicitly told how to do everything and what to do. Beetee walked him through the bombing plan and Plutarch told him that he needs to follow the mutations back into their berm to get under the arena. So the whole time they're headed north, HaYmItCh is trying to keep Lulu from poisoning herself. She sees a plant she recognizes from 11, runs into it and smells it, and starts dying. HaYmItCh pulls the plug from her chest, which somehow kills her so she won't suffer. So this is the second time an innocent little 12-year-old girl dies with HaYmItCh, his second Rue moment. So what does he do? A, does he clutch her in his arms and cry? B, does he yell angry things at the Capitol? C, does he lay her body down gently and pays his respects using the three-fingered salute from District 12? Or D, does he do the same thing as last time, pick up her dead body like a football and try to score a touchdown? If you pick D, it's your lucky day because that's exactly what he does. His reasoning is he doesn't know what they'll do with her body since she's a fake Luella, and he doesn't know what the Capitol will do to her, if she'll be buried or just dumped in the garbage. But it's so bizarre that it again takes me out of the story. It's not tragic, it's ridiculous. He's even thinking in his head how the Capitol audience viewing it will see him as a rascal for this. Are they showing me to the audience? Can they witness my refusal to hand over Lulu? Do I have the Capitol viewers glued to the screen? The rascal has run off with his district partner again. The rascal will make the Gamemakers chase him down. Delighted laughter, phone calls to friends. Are you watching this? My guy! Running off with a child's corpse is not a rascally thing to do. I understand that the Capitol is weird, but I am not convinced that they are that weird. Trust me. Like, what does Collins think humans are like at this point? Like, I'm wondering. All I have to add to this is that it's a good thing no 12-year-old girls died within reach of HaYmItCh in the original trilogy, because apparently he just would have picked up her body and bolted. HaYmItCh's reaction in this book to her dying kills any chance of me feeling anything but baffled. It is so unbelievably bizarre and just stupid. So then knockoff HaYmItCh remembers Snow threatened to kill him if he doesn't behave, and HaYmItCh was like, I'm going to pretend to behave, and then immediately forgot because he's a freaking idiot. He stops trying to prevent the Capitol from getting her body, but it's too late, and they decide to punish him for his repeated disrespect. So he has a swarm of capital-made mutations sent after him. What type of deadly, psychologically scarring monstrosities do they send for him? Butterflies that sting. They can't kill you, just like mild discomfort. So he just makes a fire easily because I think he got like some sort of like flamethrower in his backpack because of course he did. Also, he did get to keep his necklace, so he has a flamethrower and a necklace. So he makes fire with his convenient supplies and kills most of the swarm, and then easily follows them back to where they came from, finding the berm where like the trap door is, and he sticks a stick in the trap door to damage it enough so he can reopen it later and get under the arena. Wow. That punishment was not much of a punishment at all. It was in fact super helpful, very convenient. They just gave him super harmless mutts that he could easily follow back. They were just harmless butterflies. Wow, so great. I hope the other tributes in this arena are given as much grace as HaYmItCh. So then iMpLiCiT conveniently finds HaYmItCh. iMpLiCiT has not received any sponsor gifts and is hungry despite actually being with the newcomers and essentially their leader. He just can't compete with HaYmItCh spitting in people's faces and running around with children's corpses. I mean, charisma 101. HaYmItCh feeds iMpLiCiT and they talk. HaYmItCh learns the newcomers are doing worse than the careers and both groups are all on the mountain, leaving HaYmItCh opponentless in the forest. While this was essentially required because in Catching Fire we learned that HaYmItCh is away from most of the tributes for most of the game, it's not exciting for a novel. Still, it's sweet that HaYmItCh gives iMpLiCiT food, and sad to see that iMpLiCit's afraid of the dark when he's just a kid. If only we got a little bit more time to beef up iMpLiCiT, but nah, we got too many characters and too many corpses to run around with. So HaYmItCh and iMpLiCiT work together to break into the berm. iMpLiCiT gives HaYmItCh a bomb he smuggled in, plus a spare, because apparently smuggling in weapons into the arena in this book is ridiculously easy. HaYmItCh goes inside alone and finds the water tank. As he's coming back up the ladder, he's attacked by bat mutts. iMpLiCiT gives HaYmItCh a torch to fight them, and HaYmItCh straps himself to the ladder just in time for the tank to explode, and for him to be hit by a giant gush of water that conveniently kills off all the bats. HaYmItCh gets out relatively fine, which is an interesting contrast to Katniss, who in the first game explodes the food supply and is unable to walk for hours and has to crawl into a bush and then remains deaf in one ear. HaYmItCh's explosion was probably smaller, but he was also in a tunnel, so like HaYmItCh immediately starts looking for iMpLiCiT and eventually finds a clearing where fang squirrels are swarming in a giant pile. One is thrown out with a scrap of blue fabric, and HaYmItCh realizes it's iMpLiCiT because remember, they have color-coded outfits for the movie. HaYmItCh starts hitting the squirrels trying to save iMpLiCiT, and as he knocks them away, they just rejoin the swarm, only focused on iMpLiCiT and completely ignoring HaYmItCh, which is very convenient for HaYmItCh. We don't want him to actually be in danger. Finally, they leave, seemingly called away, and all that is left of iMpLiCiT is his pearly white bones. HaYmItCh, upset, immediately starts hacking everything with an axe in a rage to destroy the arena. And then the arena shakes and debris rains down and he is fine and starts cheering, "Ha, you missed," and careens through the trees like a wild man. I understand what happened to iMpLiCiT is horrific, but there's a difference between writing something horrible happening to a character and making me feel something. iMpLiCiT was a fine enough character, but to be honest, I was not particularly attached to him. And then HaYmItCh's reaction did not help. While this reaction is less ridiculous than running away with his corpse, he's just chopping up trees and running around like a crazy person. There is very little internality to it. We're kept at an emotional arm's length to the devastation, and it's hard to care. Thinking of a horrible thing to do with a character is not the same as doing it well, and I think this book does a lot of horrible things to characters, and it's pretty much, in my opinion, done poorly, at least for me. This book felt like it was rushing from crazy scene to crazy scene, like it was afraid the reader would get bored if we had moments of respite. This resulted in each tragedy feeling less meaningful because we never got to slow down and mourn. Instead, we had to move on to the next plot point, which ironically resulted in me being bored. Also, this book feels like a laundry list of horrible things happening to innocent good characters, but I never felt emotionally connected to the moment. Making a character pure good and brutally killing them is not necessarily good writing. I don't even think it's that hard to think of a horrible way to kill a character. It's like killing a puppy to make your reader sad. It's a cheap way to evoke emotion without requiring skill. Yes, you could argue Rue was a pure good kid who was killed. But that is the premise of the story, whereas she feels like an actual child, and the smaller details like her being surprised Katniss would give her a whole rabbit leg to eat, Her believing the love story is true and her reminding Katniss of Rue make her feel a bit more personal. Yes, aMPert is scared of the dark. That's a good start. But to me, it felt like a quick tidbit mentioned before we move on to the exciting action of his death and the explosion. I feel as if I'm not allowed to slow down to just be with aMPert. On top of that, this book is just so full of kids being brutally killed to the point where I became detached. Rushing through as many tragic plot points as you can is not as good as building up to one and allowing it to sit with the reader. And I will admit, to be fair, the story had so many issues up until this point that my immersion had already been broken. So to be fair, maybe this scene is okay. Maybe I would have loved it if I were not constantly being taken out of the story by the bizarre behavior of HaYmItCh and how all the returning characters were out of character and how Panem didn't even seem consistent. I stand by my critiques because I would not have felt so detached to this death if it weren't for how this book was written up to this point. But I will admit, the further into the story I got, the further I got from enjoying it. So there was just overall less of a chance I would find anything engaging. HaYmItCh then realizes that the Gamemakers are not targeting him, but actually that the arena is glitching. The sky is revealed and HaYmItCh cheers and sings a rebellious poem called The Goose in the Common because Collins has become addicted to including poems in her books. He shouts, "We got it back, we're getting it back," which if the Capitol did not see him go into the berm, they should have figured it out with all the evidence piling up that it was him. But don't worry, they'll never target him after the butterflies. The force field comes back into place and HaYmItCh realizes he failed. Then the mountain erupts with gold. HaYmItCh realizes this probably killed many of the tributes on the mountain. He thinks about how destroying the water tank may have actually doomed many of the tributes on the mountain. But don't worry, it's just a passing thought. He doesn't give much of a second thought to it. He huddles up in his clothes, which protect him from the toxic ash, and thinks about how he is built for implicit submission, which is annoying. I get it. That's the theme of the day. Thank you. Moving on. HaYmItCh does think about aMPert again and then starts crying, but don't worry because he switches to think about his girlfriend Lenore Dove. HaYmItCh constantly thinks about Lenore Dove more than any other character, often at the expense of the character who just died. We then get an excerpt from the poem Nevermore because the Goose poem wasn't enough for this chapter. Then the Gamemakers, also I am not telling you every time there's a song in this book, just so you know, there is way more. Then the Gamemakers sprinkle some rain into the arena because I guess it had some water left, which removes the toxic ash. HaYmItCh goes north and finds the edge of the arena and gets lost in a hedge. Follows a bunny out because, you know, he's a Disney princess. And then he runs into the careers. He easily kills two before being disarmed by Panache. He stalls Panache by talking about how the people want a good show and Panache will be stupid to kill him. Panache hesitates for a moment, having been mocked by the Capitol as stupid before. Then, just as he is about to kill HaYmItCh, Maysilee Donner comes, the only other surviving District 12 tribute, and shoots Panache with a poison dart. This part is directly from Catching Fire, so it did have to happen with HaYmItCh disarming these two tributes, and then getting stopped by the third, and Maysilee saving him with a poison dart. So despite HaYmItCh fighting 3 people trained to fight in these games since birth, he beat 2 of them before being disarmed. But given the restraints of the story, this is what had to happen. And it would have been a difficult fight scene to write believably. However, by making the whole situation about him stalling him by making a Panache an idiot does it no favors. I feel like there was opportunities to explain why HaYmItCh had abilities better than he did. They could have said that he practiced using an axe, like fighting with it as a kid growing up. But no, this book, later on, it also says like how he's able to beat a District 1 girl in a fight because he chopped wood in the arena after aMPert died, you know, and he chopped wood a lot, which is not the same as fighting with an axe, but okay. You know, it could have, what was set up could have been done really well, and I don't think that it was done really well. I don't think any of this book rose up to the occasion. So HaYmItCh and Maysilee team up, and we learn Maysilee was immediately separated from the Newcomers this entire time because they're irrelevant, and any important character cannot actually be hanging out with the Newcomers. Anyway, so she has not gotten any food from the sponsors, which is a crime because she's way more of an icon than HaYmItCh. She also only got darts in her bag and figured out how to add poison to the tips from the poison things in the arena. She's actually pretty clever, unlike HaYmItCh, who is supposed to be clever but is a dumbhead. They have a fancy picnic to show the Capitol that they're just as human as them and watch the sky to learn who died. They try to go through the hedge and get attacked by blood-sucking ladybugs on the hedge. Maysilee doesn't get why HaYmItCh wants to keep going north, and he can't say why because they're being televised. So he agrees to go back with her to find the newcomers. They find 3 newcomer boys being attacked by a giant porcupine bear, 2 on the ground and 1 trying to save them. Maysilee and HaYmItCh lead it away with food, only for the 3 boys to die anyway. This plays back into my issue with the newcomers. Not only are they irrelevant, I also feel like they actually still kind of did really bad in the games. Also, the biggest issue is there still can only be 1 winner, and none of these kids seem interested in being it. Yes, HaYmItCh doesn't think he'll be allowed to win at this point, but why is everyone else risking their lives when the other kids have to die anyway? The 1 boy could have lived, but he died trying to save the other 2. Maysilee is injured and could have died saving them. It seems like all these kids are acting like this is a team sport where as long as the careers are defeated, they can go home. It is nice how dedicated they are to each other, but at this point, these kids feel detached from the setting they're in. There are 31 newcomers, most of whom have known each other for a week, and they are all unquestionably trust each other and are willing to die protecting each other despite the others having to die for them to survive. They don't feel like they're from this dystopian world, and they don't feel like they're in an arena where they have to fight to the death. Also, another issue is the point of the Hunger Games from the Capital's perspective is for the kids to kill each other. In the first book, Katniss says that's the main appeal. Yes, there are mutations and there are traps in the arena, but watching kids kill each other is the highlight. But this book disproportionately has the arena killing them, which the arena that Katniss was in Catching Fire was super deadly too. But in that book, Katniss notes it might be to get the unpopular games over with, since people were upset that the victors had to go in. But also there was still so much tension with the characters thinking about betraying each other, including Katniss. Just because there were mutations and traps in that arena didn't mean it was devoid of meaningful human drama. The porcupine bear scene could have been okay in a different book, but it does feel more juvenile than the mutations ever came across in the original trilogy. By having the characters lead the porcupine bear away by throwing a jar of olives, it feels really cheap. In the original trilogy, the mutations are often horrifying, but in this book, they feel like an obstacle in a middle grade novel, just with graver results. Katniss even notes that the best mutations have a psychological torment element. In the first book, the Mutts are tracker-jackers, wasps that cause searing pain, vivid, horrific hallucinations, and in extreme cases, death. And then wolves with fur and eyes to match the dead tributes, reminding Katniss of her fallen friends and foes. She is terrified. The wolves then torture Cato for hours until Katniss kills him out of mercy, looking at what is described as a raw hunk of meat that used to be her enemy, who mouths please before she puts him out of misery with an arrow to the head. It is horrific. Then in Catching Fire, there are jabberjays that mimic the tortured screams of the characters' loved ones, which is horrifying, large violent monkeys, and a mysterious beast that leaves one tribute in pieces. The monkeys are less creative, but the baseline animal chosen is scarier than the butterflies. Then Mockingjay has large, pale, white, humanoid, reptilian creatures that whisper Katniss and smell of roses to remind her of President Snow as they track her down, killing everyone in their path without discrimination on their quest to kill her. There's also a trapdoor that opens up to a pit that smells of corpses and filled with, and I quote, black forms that crawl around in the shadows, silencing whoever survives the fall. What type of horrific monstrosities are those? No one talks about them, but reading Mockingjay, every time I'm like, what the frick are those things? It's so small and we don't get to explore it more, but like I am traumatized. Like what is that? Then the Sunrise has stinging butterflies that just hurt, don't kill. A porcupine bear that honestly just seems to attack when it's like riled up and just wants a snack. Generic bats, and crazed squirrels. What these creatures lack that many of the ones in the previous books include is psychological torment. However, every mutt in this book is just a normal animal, but aggressive. The only unique one is the giant porcupine, but it doesn't have the same terror being defeated by olives. Not every mutation is going to be equal. That's fine. But with so many in this book, it's a shame that they all lack the same horror and creativity the original trilogy had. The squirrels were the best one because, they ate everything to the bone. But The way they are conveyed is a missed opportunity. They never pose a threat to our protagonist. And on top of that, they were the only ones actually created and catching fire. They were mentioned in the description of the game. So it's like, oh, okay, everything like decent in this book just came from catching fire, I guess. It's just, while this book is depressing, at least if you can get immersed, it's definitely not as horrific. The mutations not being as horrific isn't necessarily a flaw with this book, it's just disappointing. Then HaYmItCh and Maysilee run into 2 career girls and start running away in one of the dumbest scenes in the entire book. I will read it for you now. Also, the 2 career girls they're running from are Merit and Silka. Anyway, begin scene. Suddenly, my feet lose traction and I'm on my butt, sliding into a clearing like I've hit a patch of ice. In that moment, my brain tries to make sense of the incomprehensible image. 2 young game makers in their signature white outfits hunch over an open burn covered in scarlet poppies. 2 young game makers in their signature white outfits hunch over an open berm covered in scarlet poppies. One wears a protective mask and holds some kind of drill, which emits the high-pitched whining. A third game maker leans over a mop. By the look on their faces, I know the surprise is mutual. I skid to a stop a few feet in front of them in a puddle of something that brings to mind the slime that results when you boil okra. Maysilee whizzes past the game makers and latches onto a sapling at the edge of the berm, somehow staying upright. For a moment, we all freeze. The shock is universal. Then Silka bursts into the clearing and goes down, overturning a large bucket and sending a couple gallons of slime back onto the forest floor. The game maker with the mop, who looks like he's near our age, lets out an indignant, "Hey, watch it." I know from experience that mopping's a bottom of the ladder job, so finding a game maker at it seems bizarre, like watching Plutarch Heavensby peel potatoes or President Snow cleaning the hair out of a drain. Mariette, who apparently sensed some weirdness, comes to a halt at the edge of the clearing. "What's going on? Are you game makers?" she exclaims. The game maker with the drill raises her mask and straightens up to full height. "That's right, and all 4 of you are in absolute violation of our rules. You must immediately withdraw, or there will be repercussion." "That's a lot more impressive if you weren't shaken like a leaf," observes Maysilee, fingering her blowgun. "You must be pretty expendable, you 3, getting sent in here to tidy up for us." There's a pause while everyone considers the truth of this. Then all 3 game makers make a break for the ladder that leads down to sub A. Mariette's arm snaps back and I think I'm a goner, but the trident whistles over my head and lodges into the mopper, sending him into a pillow of poppies. Almost simultaneously, the woman with the drill grabs a spot beneath her ear and comes away with a dart. She collapses as the final game maker plunges headfirst through the open berm into sub A. It takes a few moments before we hear her skull crack on the concrete below. What the frick is the Capitol doing? What the frick is the Capitol doing? So first of all, I have difficulty imagining this scene considering they're sliding around on a forest floor and someone's mopping the forest floor. And also berms are like up and they're all like sliding into the berm, which should be like a raised thing, like whatever. Second, this scene makes the Capitol so stupidly incompetent. I cannot believe this is the same Capitol from the original trilogy. Yes, the Capitol has failings in ballads such as the rebels bombing the arena, but this is absurd. This is an arena where kids fight to the death and they sent people up there to mop a small area of slime. So my theory is, due to the malfunctions, the trapdoor had been stuck open, hence the drill. So they sent people to fix it and maybe like the slime was preventing it from closing. But it's so dumb. Also, why don't they have armed guards? Why don't they block it? Why don't they keep an eye on the tributes so they know when they're coming? The game makers appear shocked to see them in the arena that they put them in the first place. It is a level of stupidity I cannot handle. Also, this is a first-person present tense. We are in HaYmItCh's head, but he does not ever even think about why they were up there. It's not even worth a thought in his empty, useless head. Instead, Maysilee is mad at him for not killing a game maker and condemning himself to death like she just did. "I know you're willing to die to kill one person and not even make a difference, Maysilee, but it's not unreasonable for him not to." I did like how the District 4 girl, a career, kills a game maker, showing that she knows the whole thing is messed up, but we don't really get much from the other careers. Also, Maysilee then turns it as like, why does 4 team up with 1 and 2? But I was always given the impression that 4 was still treated better like the other career districts than the other ones. Yes, District 1 is luxury and 2 supplies peacekeepers, which Maysilee shouldn't know. But I still think 4 would be treated better than everyone else, which would allow them to train to be careers. This creates more questions than answers. And also, Maysilee doesn't like reflect on this and be like, oh wow, Career killed her. She's immediately like, oh, I'm still gonna have to kill you. And then she's like, hey Mitch, she killed her, why didn't you? Like, it's no reflection of these characters, no internal thoughts. HaYmItCh never considers this. Katniss in her books, and also Snow in his book, will consider things that happen and actually think what they mean. HaYmItCh never does that. HaYmItCh does not think. Head empty. If Collins wanted to emphasize propaganda in this book, this whole novel was a missed opportunity to emphasize the careers. A Hunger Games book is not necessarily predisposed to subtle propaganda, so instead it would have been better to have a prominent character believe the propaganda, such as a career tribute, and then they have to learn it is wrong before tragically dying anyway. But overall, they're portrayed as dumb jocks who just follow the Capitol, which if anything felt like a more derogative portrayal than the original trilogy. Cato in the first Hunger Games book was a threat. Even his irrational anger was depicted as a danger. Panache is a joke, and his anger is mocked. And while the career deaths in Sunrise are all of them being bad without remorse besides the off-page one of the girl who killed the Gamemaker, the original Hunger Games book did more to paint Cato, the main career's antagonist's death, as tragic and an atrocity of the Capitol. These are children being raised for slaughter by the people who should be protecting them, not dumb jocks. Anyway, Maysilee sings a song about ladybugs burning because, we gotta have all them songs in here. And they realize, oh, we can just burn the hedge to get rid of the ladybugs. So they do that, and they end up outside the arena, which has a couple feet outside before ending in a cliff. This logistically also gives me questions. We know there's still cameras out here to film, but it's said to be outside with the real sky and clear undrugged air. That's not how bushes work. So am I to believe the force field was destroyed because it was touching the bush and this burned a hole? Is this supposed to be an energy barrier because of... If it was a physical structure, it would not have flickered before allowing the clean, real air in. I know the Catching Fire movie depicted the force field as a more physical structure, but I don't think that was intended in that book or this. I think it was always meant to be an energy field, because in that book, it doesn't have chunks raining down. She just sees the real sky and fireworks. Would HaYmItCh be able to see the edges of it when he walks through? When he looks back, does the sky change color past the hedges, or is his view obscured? Are the hedges so high he can't even see the sky behind them? If that's the case, shouldn't there be a constant looming presence in the arena? If there's now a hole, should some of the drugged air be coming out of it and some of the clear air going in? Does the force field actually start above the hedges and the hedges are more of a physical barrier? I have so many questions and none of them are even considered, let alone answered. In Catching Fire, breaking through the force field required a massive explosion that destroyed the whole thing. In this book, you can make a hole through it by burning a bush. So at the bottom of the cliff, HaYmItCh sees a giant generator that must be powering the arena. He and Maysilee disagree on what to do. Maysilee wants to go back to find Welly, a little girl who is the last newcomer alive because they suck at staying alive, and who I cannot remember a single scene of before this point. And HaYmItCh wants to stay here because... And HaYmItCh wants to stay on the cliff because at this point, it seems like all he cares about is breaking the arena. Who cares about that little 12-year-old, not HaYmItCh? Maysilee goes back to get their supplies when HaYmItCh stays and discovers there is a force field around the generator that when he accidentally kicks a rock down, bounces it back up. Maysilee screams and HaYmItCh runs to her, coming in time to see her speared to death by bubblegum pink water birds with sword-like beaks. Again, the birds ignore HaYmItCh even when he kills some because, like ampBert, they're only targeted towards Maysilee. It's also revealed that the same thing happened to the District 4 girl who killed the other Gamemaker, except I think she got eaten by squirrels. So I will say this is HaYmItCh's best reaction to a death. He really focuses on Maysilee and her loss of life for a more extended length than he did ampBert. He thinks of their relationship, and Mags even sends him strawberry ice cream and coffee from his endless sponsors to remind him of Maysilee and comfort him. This is the death where the story is allowed to slow down for at least a couple pages and consider the loss. No bizarre reaction of him running off with her body, no distractions or shifting focus to his girlfriend. Maysilee is given a proper goodbye as he thinks of her and how he had gone from hating her to seeing her as a sister. However, I'm not holding back in this review, and I still have a nitpick. First of all, HaYmItCh thinks I think about cleaning her up, but this is her final poster, and I won't tidy it up to make it easier for those monsters in the Capitol to sleep tonight. They are literally televising kids to fight to the death for entertainment. They are sleeping fine. The fact that her body is brutal is better for them. That's what they want. They had one child eaten to the point where only his bones remained. They don't need comfort. What are you talking about, HaYmItCh? Do you not know where you live? Not cleaning her up proves absolutely nothing. And I know in the first book, Katniss put flowers around Rue to make her beautiful, to prove that Rue was more than a piece in their games, but a real human being. And this had an impact. It was also the complete opposite of HaYmItCh. So from the outside, I know HaYmItCh is proving nothing, but I don't know why he would even think he is proving something. It feels like with each death, Collins wanted HaYmItCh to have some dramatic reaction that takes a stand against the Capitol, and it feels really forced. Not every death calls for a rebellious act. In Catching Fire, Katniss is not constantly sticking it to the man every time one of her allies dies. With Mags, she runs off and continues to survive. With Ryrus, she continues to fight. Not every death needs an emotional beat, and it feels like with Sunrise, she was trying to force everyone to be a Rue. Also, throughout the whole book, characters bring up the metaphor painting their poster, which means to send their own message instead of being used for capital propaganda. And it is so often, it feels like another example of the author excessively telling us the theme. Also, my other issue is we now have 3 characters specifically targeted, swarmed, and killed by Mutts, 2 of which HaYmItCh tried to fight and was ignored by, but HaYmItCh has already publicly disrespected the president, who has told him he will be killed in the game, and he has since damaged the arena and then cheered about it, and he also ran away with Lulu's body to spite the Gamemakers, and he has never been targeted by Mutts besides the lame little butterflies. And they were non-lethal. And the only reason I can fathom him not being targeted in the same way is because he is the main character and has plot armor. HaYmItCh then remembers that Welly exists and then goes to find her, deciding he will ensure she wins since he knows he's going to die. He plans to use the bomb Ampert smuggled in because security sucks. He then plans on killing the last surviving career Silka because the other one was killed by the squirrels, and then he plans on killing himself. He easily finds Welly in this massive arena very close to where he already is. She's starving to death in a tree because only HaYmItCh gets sponsors, no one else. Speaking of which, he immediately gets another parachute from a sponsor right after getting the ice cream and coffee 2 seconds ago. He gets chocolate and warm milk to feed it to Welly that night because everyone knows starving children should have chocolate and not like soup broth would be way better. Also, Silka ends up sitting under their tree crying and HaYmItCh drops her chocolate, which is a nice humanizing moment, reminding you they're all kids. Probably the best moment of the game portion, even if it was really small. Unfortunately, the next time we see Silka, it's immediately ruined because she goes full villain mode. Still, it makes sense Welly didn't receive sponsors because she's starving to death and she's a little kid and no one thinks she can win. Silka, on the other hand, is one of the final 3 and she's a skilled career and she seems to not be receiving anything. HaYmItCh has literally gotten 2 desserts sent to him back to back. This level of sponsors he's getting is absurd. Especially since it's supposed to be harder to get things and more expensive to get things later in the game. And dude's just getting freaking dessert constantly. The next day, Silka's gone and HaYmItCh carries Welly down the tree. He wants to get things to feed her so that she won't die and decides to leave her alone when Silka literally knows where they are because she was right under them. He is so dumb. It is so dumb. HaYmItCh, you're a freaking idiot. So dumb. So he leaves and gets another parachute, and this time it's a pitcher of milk, like the one he drank when he was supposed to give it to Snow and was like, oh no, there's no milk. HaYmItCh immediately knows it's poison and that he'll have to give it to Welly or he'll appear heartless, and it's so dumb. Again, the other tributes who got a target on the back were personally targeted by swarms of Mutts that killed them, while HaYmItCh gets an obviously poisoned pitcher of milk sent by the president. Not only is this easily avoidable, it also feels like a level of special personal attention that the other tributes didn't get. He feels like a main character, and not in a way that justifies him being the protagonist, but in an immersion-breaking shout in my face, hey, remember this is a book that someone wrote? When he gets back to Welly, he sees that Silka has decapitated her because duh. And now she's a pure evil villain, even though this is arena where kids are forced to fight to the death. But she's evil for having killed Welly, and HaYmItCh tells her. And HaYmItCh tells her so. So HaYmItCh and her fight, and HaYmItCh's new plan is to kill Silka and then die himself, which I would argue is more evil than what Silka did. She is a child who killed another child to try to live. HaYmItCh is a child who wants to kill another child and then himself to send a message. Her motivation is much more reasonable. He's been trying to send a message this whole time, which resulted in the mountain erupting, killing more kids, and him abandoning his so-called allies to fend for themselves when he could have been helping them. Maysilee specifically kept saying, let's go back to help them, and he refused because he was so obsessed with his stupid message. He kept saying Snow would target him and endanger any allies near him, but HaYmItCh was never targeted besides butterflies and milk. It seems he's valued his message over everyone's life this entire story, and now he'd rather have every kid in here die to send a message rather than let the wrong kid live. I do not like his character. The original Hunger Games book ends with Katniss feeling mercy for Cato, the last career. This book ends with HaYmItCh wanting to kill the career and himself to prove a point. I like purposely morally gray characters, but everything leading up to this moment in this book tells me his actions are supposed to be that of a selfless rebel standing up to the evil capital. Anyway, they fight. He leads her to the cliff outside the arena. She throws an axe and he collapses due to his organs falling out. The axe flies off the cliff. It bounces off the force field back up, hits her in the head, and then HaYmItCh drops a bomb on the generator when the people over the announcer are like, stop, don't do that. And he destroys it in order to paint his poster. He ends up surviving and realizes based on what Snow says, his family is screwed because he's a freaking idiot. He is in isolation while healing, at first in a facility with human experimentation and then back in the training center suite where the TV starts playing past games, including the one from Ballad, which is supposed to be hidden from public view. That in Ballad, Snow said he wanted it hidden from public view, but now he's showing it to HaYmItCh to psych him out because HaYmItCh is the main character. Okay, great. HaYmItCh then plays along with everything Snow wants, commenting on how he's rating implicit submission because we got to get that theme in there. It's shown that Mags and Wiress have been tortured, and that's why Wiress is crazy, even though previously we thought it was from her game. And apparently all the other tributes in her game went crazy, but not her, even though her arena was super trippy and messed up. And it just, to me, feels like everything has to be because of this book, because this is the special book. Everything has to be related to it. And then Mags is torture, and she's in a wheelchair, and I think it's to explain why she's and I think it's meant to explain why she's not physically as capable of the others in Catching Fire, but in Catching Fire, she's freaking 80. I thought she was just old, but now it's because she was tortured because, HaYmItCh being amazing. And so I don't know why this book is explaining something that easily made more sense with old age. And also I thought she might have had a stroke because Katniss couldn't understand her speaking. But no, now it's just because of torture. So neither Mags or Wiress or Beetee were killed because the Capitol wants to keep them around so they can try rebelling again and Catching Fire, but that time succeed. Who cares that if Collins wanted to show a failed rebellion, that having one new character who is executed would have been more impactful than having 3 fan service characters who live. And I understand that there's an excuse that Beetee's brain is too useful, but honestly it's stupid. No. Effie stays by HaYmItCh's side in a sort of protective way, not claiming any credit for any of her achievements, which is sweet. Also, at some point in the book, Plutarch says he'll recommend Effie for the District 12, escort for being so good, which is odd because this book seems to be painting it as she's so connected to HaYmItCh in District 12. But in the original series, she's oh, this is the worst one, and I'm just hoping to get moved up to a better position. So this doesn't really fit with how she behaved. This she saw it as the worst one, but now she's so competent that she's getting assigned the worst. Yeah, no. If anything, she's joining in so young that she should have been promoted by that point. And also, she did not seem to care that much, but whatever. So the recap video of the games is heavily edited to make the careers look smarter, the newcomers non-existent, and to make HaYmItCh look like he never cared about anyone but himself. And Maysilee, for some reason, why let him be shown caring about anyone at all? Maybe it was because she killed Panache to save HaYmItCh, so they had to show the alliance because they have to show how Panache died. However, they still show HaYmItCh trying to save her and holding her when she died, which they could have cut since it's confirmed they cut him holding Lulu as she died. He literally is why Lulu dies. He pulls the thing out of her chest. She's already dying, but he speeds up the death. But they felt like that was something they could cut. And also they edit it so that it looks like Maysilee and him were breaking up the alliance when she left, and not that she was just going back to get supplies. So which makes it look better that he came to save her because they weren't even allies anymore. So it's dumb. Why not go full bad? I understand it's because in Catching Fire that part is shown, so it has to stay, but you see, it's just, this whole thing is just creating more questions than answers. Then HaYmItCh remains in the Capitol for 2 weeks, being paraded around in a disrespectful and humiliating way, putting him in a cage at a party with only Effie beside him. I feel this was done because in Mockingjay, it is said that his family and girlfriend were all mysteriously dead 2 weeks after his games. And Collins in Sunrise decided she didn't want to really have to write them reuniting and spending time together because, we just want to write the games and get it over with because that's all we want to read right now. So instead of having them reuniting and spending some time together and building the tension of like, oh, maybe they will get to live before the rug's pulled out from under HaYmItCh and they're killed, she decided to just have him staying in the capital for 2 weeks, despite that not happening in the earlier book or the prequel book where they're always just sent home pretty soon. And also, he probably was in surgery for the 2 weeks anyway, so that could have covered it. So I don't know why he needed another 2 weeks, because at that point it would have been more of a month after he left the games. But also, if they had died when he got home, he would have said that. No one would be like, my family died right when I got home. They wouldn't say 2 weeks after I did this thing, my family died, which is also right when I got home. But, we're not going to say that. That's not how people talk, okay? So he gets home on the train, riding with 3 different coffins of the other tributes. He walks home to immediately see his family at home on fire, and his mother and brother die inside. He stays with Luella's family, and is like taking sleeping medicine the whole time because he's so sad, and we can't write about him being awake. He goes to his family's funeral along with the other tributes and Wyatt's father, who killed himself. At the funeral, Katniss's dad sings a song from Ballad, and we get the entire lyrics. And they do the District 12 three-finger salute from the original trilogy. I actually did kind of like seeing the funeral of the dead tributes, since we've never gotten to see a District 12 funeral before, and I actually think that's like an interesting piece of world building that was included. Then HaYmItCh remembers Lenore Dove and then goes to the meadow to meet her. She just got released out of prison and was put on house arrest and immediately went to go frolicking in the meadow because I guess they don't enforce the law here. She finds random candy on the ground and starts eating it. And HaYmItCh thinks it's the candy he told his brother to give her after he was reaped into the game. She eats a candy, they reunite, HaYmItCh feeds her another one and then realizes it's the wrong color and, oh no! President Snow left poison candy in a random-ass meadow and knew exactly where Lenore Dove would walk so that she would eat it, but not HaYmItCh. And, wow, he's just so smart, and Lenore Dove dies. The last chapter is a bunch of small scenes of time passing and HaYmItCh pushing everyone away in his Victor's Village mansion he got for winning the game and becoming an alcoholic. We get a scene where he goes on the victory tour, where in District 11, Plutarch takes HaYmItCh to a secret attic and tells him to keep rebelling. This attic is in the Justice Building and has no cameras, which is where HaYmItCh takes Katniss and Peeta in Catching Fire to talk without cameras. This explains something in the original trilogy that could have been interesting, but it's just bland and like kind of thrown in there to explain something, but it's not really relevant. It's just kind of glossed over. Plutarch asks HaYmItCh to keep trying to rebel and says they need someone just like HaYmItCh but luckier to try to make the parallel that HaYmItCh is like Katniss but luckier. But honestly, I don't think they're that alike. In the first book, Katniss is just trying to survive until the end when the idea of letting Peeta die and leaving the games alone is so unfathomable that she suggests double suicide so that the Capitol can't have their victor, which results in the Capitol letting them win. Then in Catching Fire, she is afraid of the rebellion for much of it, fearing how much death it will cause. Then she is not part of the rebel plan again during the game, this time just wanting Peeta to survive, until at the very end where she realizes what Beetle's plan is and destroys the arena as an act of rebellion. HaYmItCh was not like that. He was mainly focused on trying to destroy the arena, constantly trying to make a point and rebel with no regard for his life or the lives of others. Katniss was a girl trying to survive who actually sparked a rebellion. She was empathetic and valued human life, which by the end included the lives of careers and capital children. HaYmItCh was trying to send a message, and he seemed uninterested in life. Between all these scenes, as they depict HaYmItCh's deterioration, there are excerpts from the poem Nevermore, which Lenore Dove was named after. We get the entire very long poem. Honestly, I didn't care for it. It broke up the flow of the chapter, and to be honest, by this point, I just was so burnt out by this book, I just wanted to end. So excerpts made it longer, therefore I didn't like them. And I wasn't sad because I was over it. We also get the line, even in my head, my language becomes dull and flat, stripped of the color and music of yesterday, which to me just feels like a lame excuse for this HaYmItCh to speak so much folksier than he did in the original trilogy. No, it's not inconsistent characterization. It's just trauma changes your entire manner of speech and personality. Ignore the fact that the Katniss at the end of Mockingjay, who is severely traumatized, still has pieces of her personality and doesn't seem like a different person. That's in HaYmItCh's case, he's just a different person. It's good writing. It explains it so well. Then we get one epilogue that takes place at the end of the trilogy, at the end of Mockingjay, once Panem is free, talking about how HaYmItCh is healing. And while it's not perfect, it's only 2 pages and has no song, so I'm cool with it. The end. Honestly, the ending to me really demonstrated how pointless this story felt. It's a tragic downfall summed up as being due to HaYmItCh's lack of luck. It's not an interesting character study, but a plot-heavy book with a rushed ending to make it fit with an already complete series that was better off without it. Then there's a 2-page epilogue at the end to give the reader hope, even though it definitely doesn't fit any message of this novel. Unlike Ballad, this book only works within the series, and even then, with how different it felt to me, the way the world and characters were written, it also did not work within the series for me personally. Yes, I was told these were the same characters and world, but when I looked at them, I found myself somewhere I did not recognize, surrounded by characters I did not know. I could not suspend my disbelief enough to believe this was the same HaYmItCh, President Snow, Beetee, or Panem. To be fair, I was probably a bit harsh about some of the elements I critiqued, but I stand by my lack of immersion. My nitpicking is a result of this book's failure to do its most important job, and that is to make me believe this story was actually in the Hunger Games world. Normally, I would like to do a summary at the end of my review, but I've been so thorough that I think it's unnecessary. I hope you enjoyed this review. I know this is an unpopular opinion, and honestly, I wish it wasn't my opinion. I wanted to like this book. Please feel free to comment your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear them. If you like this book, I am jealous, and if you disliked it, I hope you can find solace in this review. And if you didn't even read the book, I appreciate your dedication. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a great day. I'll see you later.